While sweet potato and potato are both underground parts of the plant, the sweet potato is considered to be a root modification and the potato is considered to be a stem modification. Why? Why is the spiny structure on a citrus plant called a thorn and on an opuntia called a spine? Why do some roots grow upright? Well, you'll find answers to all of these questions and more in the chapter Morphology of Flowering Plants. The notes of this class along with DPP questions for practice will be shared with you on the PW app. There is this batch called Complete Botany by Shalini Ma'am, which is a free batch which you can access using the link given in the description below. And while you're on the app, make sure to check out all of the amazing features that's going to take you one step closer to your dream of becoming a doctor. Now, without any further delay, let's get started. So first things first, for this chapter, should you refer the old NCERT textbook or the new one? I would suggest you refer the old NCERT textbook because in the new NCERT, modifications is deleted, but it is still part of your NEET syllabus. So you should refer the old book. And also, if you look at the NEET syllabus, you have various angiosperm families included, which are neither part of your old NCERT or your new NCERT, for which you should rely on the class notes, which you will get on the app after the lecture is over. So let's get started, guys. What is morphology? This chapter is called Morphology of Flowering Plants. Where did we get the term morphology from? Let's look at its etymology. So morphology is derived from two words, morphe meaning shape or form, logos or logy meaning study of. So, you know there's zoology, biology, geology. Logy means study of something, right? So, in this case, morphology is a branch of science where we study the shape, size and form of various structures. This chapter is called Morphology of Flowering Plants. So, in this chapter, we will specifically focus on the features of flowering plants. So, basically angiosperms, right? So, in angiosperms, in a typical angiosperm plant, you find a couple of parts. Let's take a look at them. You would have studied this in your second grade, but yeah. The part that is below the ground, in most cases, not always, is the root. And then you have an erect aerial stem. The stem bears leaves and flowers and fruits. And within the fruits, you find seeds. Okay. So, we're going to learn about the morphology of every one of these parts of a plant. Starting from the root, then we'll talk about the stem and the leaf and the flower, fruit, seed, all of that. Okay. So, let's get started with the root. We will cover the vegetative parts first and then we'll move on to the reproductive parts. Yeah. What are the characteristics of a root? Roots are, so they generally develop from the radicle of the seed is what is given. What is the radicle? Radicle is a part of the embryo. Now listen, seed is like a plant's baby. When you sow the seed in the soil, it becomes a new plant, a baby plant, right? So for the seed to give rise to a small, tiny plant, a sapling, it should have a baby plant inside it, right? So the baby little plant that lies inside the seed, which is in the future going to give rise to the plant, is what we call the embryo. You know about human embryos. You've learned about human reproduction, so you know for sure that in humans, the baby doesn't look human initially. In the early embryonic stages, we're just a ball of cells, right? And eventually, gastrulation happens, the germ layers are formed, and later we start appearing more and more like humans. Likewise, even inside the seed, the baby does not appear like a plant already. It has certain parts. Okay. For example, if you look at the gastrula, once the germ layers are formed, you know that the cells in the ectoderm is going to give rise to the skin. The cells in the mesoderm is probably going to, give rise to the heart, and endoderm is going to become your gut, and all of that is already predestined. The cells know what it's going to become in the future, right? Likewise, even in the seed, there is an embryo where there are different parts, and each part knows its final fate. So, in the embryo, which looks nothing like an adult plant, it's like a very undifferentiated sort of a tissue that lies inside the seed. So over there, you will have a part known as the radicle, and this radicle is going to give rise to the root system once the seed germinates. Okay, so once the seed germinates, roots have to form, stem has to form, leaves have to form, right? So this part of the embryo which lies inside the seed is what is going to give rise to the future root system. But look here, it's not given that the roots always develop from the radicle of the seed. Very, very important point to note here is that generally, in most cases, that is how it is. What's our second point? Roots are found underground. Again, generally. It's not always true. There are exceptions. In most cases and most plants, roots are found below the soil, so they are underground. Again, generally, roots are non-green. Non-green meaning not green in color like the leaves. They're usually brown in color and hard, right? So, yeah, that's the different characteristics of the root. What is the use of a root to a plant? What is the function of a root? What role does a root play in a plant? Firstly, it provides anchorage. It makes sure that the plant is firmly attached to the soil. Second, it helps in absorption of water and a lot of minerals from the soil. Sometimes it may help in storing reserve food, and sometimes it also synthesizes plant growth regulators, which we also call plant hormones. Okay, so these are some of the primary functions of a root. Let's talk about the different types of roots. You can find 3 different types of roots in different angiosperms. The 3 types are taproot, fibrous root, and adventitious root. What is a taproot? Taproot arises from the radicle. I told you that the root system arises from the radicle. Radicle gives rise to the root, right? So, in this taproot system, what happens is the radicle which is present inside the seed within the embryo, part of the embryo, that will elongate. The direct elongation of the radicle gives rise to the taproot system. So, in this taproot system, you have a primary root which is thick. This gives out branches which are called secondary roots, and the further branches are called tertiary roots. Okay, so this directly elongated radicle bears roots on its sides which are called lateral roots. If you look carefully, you will notice how the primary root is the thickest, and as it branches further, it goes on becoming thinner and thinner. Okay, now where can you find such type of root system? You find it in dicots. For example, you can find it in mustard plant. Mustard is a dicot plant, or you can write any dicot example. Okay, now what are fibrous roots? Fibrous roots also initially develop from the radicle itself, but the primary root that forms here, okay, is short-lived. It dies out quickly. So in order to keep up with the plant's requirements, newer roots have to form. Where do they form from now? They form from the base of the stem. Okay, so this originates from the base of the stem. Here, the primary root, like I mentioned, is short-lived. Compared to a taproot system, you can see further more branching here. Okay, and such types of roots can be found in monocot plants such as wheat. What do we have next? We have the adventitious root system. Remember, I told you that roots are generally formed from the radicle, not always, right? So this is an exception. Whenever roots form in a plant from parts other than the radicle, from anywhere else but the radicle, then you call it adventitious root. Okay, so roots arise from parts other than the radicle. You can see that in the case of monstera and banyan tree. This is monstera. You see a lot of these. It's an ornamental plant with huge leaves, very pretty plant. So here you can find adventitious roots that are arising from the stem. Even in the banyan tree, of course, you see roots that are arising from the stem, drooping downwards and forming pillars of sorts, right? So yeah, that is adventitious root. Now, in plants, you for sure have either a taproot or fibrous root. Okay, if it's dicot, it will have taproot. If it's a monocot plant, it will have fibrous root for sure, which is meant to anchor the plant to the soil and help in absorption. Adventitious roots are roots that you find in addition to either taproot or fibrous root system. Now that I mentioned banyan tree has adventitious root, do I mean that it has only adventitious root? No. Adventitious roots will always be present in addition to either taproot or fibrous root. Since this is a dicot plant, this will have normal taproot underneath, underground. In addition to that, to perform some function, adventitious roots have also formed. Okay. So a plant will not only have adventitious roots is what I mean. Yeah. Now let's talk about the different regions of a root. If you take like a root like this, look at its tip. Okay. Tip of the root. This is called the tip of the root. This is called the base of the root. If you take a look at the tip of the root and kind of magnify it, you can find various distinct regions at the root tip. So let's take a look at what those different regions are. At the tip, absolute tip, you can find a region called the root cap. Obviously, like a cap, it is covering the root tip. What is this root cap? This root cap is said to be like a thimble-like structure. What is a thimble now? What is a thimble? Thimble is this structure that tailors use while sewing to make sure the fingertips are protected and they don't, often pierce themselves. So it's a protective structure that tailors use. Some similar protective structure you can find at the tip of the root as well, and that's called the root cap. And this root cap is known to secrete mucilage, okay, and also perceive gravitropism. You see, when the roots grow longer inside the soil has a lot of these gritty particles. If the root is penetrating through it, it will get damaged, right? So when this secretes mucus, produces mucus, it kind of lubricates that whole area and makes sure there is less friction and less damage. Now, I told you that this root cap is protective in function. What exactly is it protecting? It's protecting a region called the region of meristematic activity that lies immediately on top of the root cap, or within the root cap, you can say. As the name itself indicates, in the region of meristematic activity, you can find meristematic tissues. What is the function of meristematic tissues? These tissues are known to constantly keep on dividing, okay? When a root has to grow, growth mostly happens at the tip. When your hair grows, does your hair grow from the tip or from the base here? It grows from here. But in roots, it's not like that. Growth happens at the tip mostly. And when growth happens, newer cells are added to the root. How do newer cells get added to the root? It cannot just happen like by magic, right? So the existing cells will undergo cell divisions repeatedly and give rise to newer cells, and as a result of increase in the number of cells, the roots will grow deeper down and penetrate the soil. So this is the part of the plant root that is mostly involved in growth of the root, okay? So here there are precious cells that are constantly dividing and helping the root to grow deeper. So that region is protected by the root cap. What do we have next? In the next region, you have what is called, okay, so this is the root cap. Here you have the region of meristematic activity. Over that, you have a region of elongation. So the cells here, few of the cells of the meristematic tissue, they stop dividing and start increasing in size. So the meristematic tissue has cells that are constantly dividing. It's almost like they don't grow big enough, okay? So it's dividing all the time, and there are a lot of these tiny cells. So some of these meristematic cells, one subset of them, they stop undergoing cell division and start increasing in length, okay? So when they increase in size, they increase in this axis. It's not like they're becoming bigger like this, it's like they're becoming bigger in this axis, longitudinal axis. So it'll appear like they are elongating. So you call the cells in this region of elongation. What do we have next? We have the region of maturation. In the region of maturation, cells have stopped dividing, cells have stopped increasing in size. Now they've taken up permanent functions inside the plant root. Whether they have to become parenchyma or they have to become part of the vascular bundles, whatever it is, they have taken up their permanent function inside the root and they've become permanent tissues. We call that region the region of maturation. And within the region of maturation, you can find a lot of root hair. Most of the absorption happens at the root hair. Usually, when I was little, when I first learnt about how roots are, involved in the absorption of water and minerals and all of that, I used to always think that roots absorb water from their tip. Almost like when you have a refill or something, like imagine like it's a pen's refill and from the tip, some blue liquid will go up like that. That is how I used to visualize it, okay, as a little girl. But it was only much later when I was your age that I realized that absorption does not happen like this. It first happens like this horizontally and then it is taken up, right? So what happens here is you have these root hair arising from the epidermis of the root. They're arising superficially. It's not like they have a deep connection inside. Outermost layer of cells, epidermis. From there, single cells give rise to unicellular root hair, and water absorption happens mostly by here, and from the water absorbed from the root hair gets transported to the xylem that is present inside, and the xylem takes it upwards. So it may happen slightly from this area also, but mostly majorly water absorption happens from here. It's horizontal first and then it goes vertical. It's not like it's happening from the tip upward. So the reason these root hair help in so much absorption is because they increase the surface area. Greater the surface area, more better is the absorption of water and minerals. So that's about the different regions of the root. Now let's take a look at modifications of the root. I told you that root's major primary function is to help anchor the plant to the soil and also help in absorption of water and minerals from the soil. Whenever a root does something hatke, like it's not doing what it is usually expected to do, but it's doing something else very different, then you say that the root is modified. And you call that a root modification. Okay, so ideally a root usually performs these two functions. One is anchorage and the other one is absorption. If a root is doing anything other than that, then you call it a root modification. For example, a root could be storing food, which is not something that the root usually does, right? In that case, you say that the root is modified. So yeah, they are called root modifications. Roots in some plants change their shape and structure to perform functions other than their primary functions. Such changes are called modifications, and such roots are said to be modified. For what reasons could roots be modified? One I have already mentioned. It can be modified to store food, it can be modified to provide support, it can be modified to help in respiration as well. Let's see roots that are modified for storage. These are things that we regularly use in our kitchens, right? So carrots, turnips and sweet potatoes, all of these are underground parts of the stem. Unlike the roots of a pea plant or unlike the roots of a grass, these are not thin and fibrous. These are very thick and fleshy. The reason they are so fat, thick and fleshy is because they're storing a lot of reserve food within them, mostly in the form of starch. So these are called root modifications and they're modified to store food. So carrot is a taproot that is modified, turnip is also a taproot that is modified, and sweet potato is a modified adventitious root. Next, roots that are modified to provide support to the plant. You know how in banyan trees, if this is like the trunk, banyan trees are huge, beautiful, enormous trees, right? So this could be the trunk and it'll have like a huge canopy, right? The foliage would have spread across all over here. Now this is too much burden on the roots because roots job is not only to absorb water, it also has to anchor this entire mass of the tree and make sure it is attached to the soil, right? So it becomes too much for the taproot of a banyan tree to take the load of such a huge tree. It will need additional structures. So what happens here is the branches that are there in the banyan tree, these branches will start producing adventitious roots that will start growing towards the soil. It will grow longer and longer and longer, and eventually it will reach the soil. Once it reaches the soil, it penetrates the soil and forms pillar of sorts. So this entire huge canopy is not only supported by the tap roots that were initially there. There are these hanging roots that you can see that started to arise from the branches and droop down and then eventually penetrated the soil. These are acting like pillars for the banyan tree and providing support. Such type of roots are called prop roots. Okay, quite obviously, since they are not arising from the radicle, they are arising from the stem. These are adventitious root modifications. Likewise, you have something called stilt roots. This can be seen in monocot plants like maize and sugarcane. Here is a maize root. Here is a maize plant and here is a sugarcane plant. So, in maize and sugarcane, both being monocot plants, there will be fibrous root system. Okay, so this is the fibrous root system. And here you have the maize or the sugarcane plant. Since the plant grows pretty tall, okay, it's tall and lanky. So if there is a heavy wind in this area where these plants are growing, it's possible that the plant stem might break or topple over. It requires more protection, more support to make sure that it doesn't topple off and fall off and get tumbled down, right? So what happens here is, if this is the stem, okay, these fibrous roots, you know, they arise from the base of the stem. In addition to these fibrous roots, you can see that roots will start arising from the lower nodes of the plant. The point on the stem from which the leaves arise is called the node. All of these lines that I'm drawing represent the nodes. That is from where, that is a region from where the leaves will arise. So from these lower nodes, roots will start forming. And these roots will start getting elongated and they kind of form like a tent-like structure and make sure that the stem has additional support, and it makes sure that the stem remains sturdy even during heavy winds, okay? So that keeps the stem secured in its place. So for support, stilt roots play an important role in case of maize and sugarcane. Now let's talk about the roots that are modified for respiration. Respiration, what really is respiration? Respiration is that process by which inside of our cells, ATP gets generated from the food we eat or the foods they synthesize. All living organisms, be it plants, animals, microbes, we require energy to survive, right? And that energy we mostly obtain in the form of ATP. How do we get ATP? How is ATP formed? When the food that plants prepare is broken down by a process called respiration, the energy in the food is converted to ATP. Okay. For this process, plants require oxygen. Okay. Aerobic respiration happens, and for that reason, they require oxygen. Of course, plants take in carbon dioxide and give out oxygen for during photosynthesis, but in respiration, plants also require oxygen. What happens in some plants that are found in mangroves and like water, waterlogged areas is within the soil, a good quality soil should have some features. The soil particle has to be small. It should have some water holding capacity, like within the soil particles there should be water holding capacity, and also within the soil particles there should be spaces for air. The soil has to be well aerated. It should not be too aerated like sand also, but little bit amount of aeration has to be there, because that is where the roots get oxygen from. Otherwise they are present inside the soil, right? They can't take oxygen from up above the ground. They will rely on oxygen present in the air spaces between the soil particles. But what happens when they are waterlogged for too long is that they will not get sufficient oxygen required for respiration. In that case, what happens? The existing tap roots will produce horizontal roots. Like if this is the tree, let's say, this has tap roots. This will produce horizontal roots, and at certain junctions in these horizontal roots, some roots develop uprightly. Normally, in most cases, generally, they are underground parts of the plant. But in some cases, as in the case of this mangrove plant called Rhizophora, roots are produced above the ground. Okay, so all of these horn-like structures that you're looking at, of course, you would have seen them if you visited the mangrove area in Kerala or Udupi or wherever. If you've not seen them, just pay attention the next time you're visiting any seaside. Okay, so here you can notice how there are these horizontal roots that will give rise to roots that are upright. These are called breathing roots or respiratory roots, or you even call them pneumatophores. What happens in these roots? How do they help in respiration? In this above ground part of the root, there will be tiny, tiny pores present on the surface. These pores are called lenticels or pneumatodes. By means of these lenticels, gaseous exchange will happen. So oxygen can enter the plant root through this, and then respiration can happen. Okay. Does that mean these plants do not have normal roots? They do have normal regular roots that help in absorption and anchorage, but they are facing a problem because they are mostly in waterlogged conditions. They're not getting sufficient oxygen for respiration, which is why they have made an idea, and they've produced horizontal roots which will further produce vertically upright roots which grows above the ground. It has pores called pneumatodes or lenticels through which gaseous exchange will happen. So that's how roots are modified for respiration. So that's about the root. Now we'll have to talk about the stem. Now the stem develops from a part of the embryo called the plumule. Similar to how the embryo had a part called the radicle which gave rise to the root system, the plumule is the part that will give rise to the shoot system. Stem in most cases generally is the ascending part of the plant, which means that is the part that grows upright And on a stem you can see leaves, flowers and fruits. So it is the part that bears leaves, flowers and fruits. It also bears buds that have meristematic tissue, and these buds could be terminal, in which case they are present at the tip of the stem. If this is like the stem, okay, if the bud is present at the tip, you call that the terminal bud. Or if it is present at the axil of leaves, which is the angle between the leaf and the stem, if there are buds present here, then you call it axillary buds. Now, in most cases, the stems when they are young, when the plant is young, is going to be green in color like this. But as the plant grows older in shrubs and trees, what happens is the stem will become harder and it will become woodier and turn brown in color. So, this is how it looks when it gets older. Next, what are the primary functions of a stem? What is the stem supposed to do in a plant? Obviously, it bears a lot of appendages such as the leaves, flowers and fruits. If not for the stem, they should all be lying on the soil, right? So, if so many leaves of a plant are lying on the soil, they will be overlapping each other and they will not receive sufficient aeration and sunlight. So, because of a stem, the leaves are kind of uniformly placed and they have access to air around them and they get exposed to sunlight, right? So, it bears appendages such as the leaves, flowers and fruits. Also, because of the vascular bundle present inside the stem, which is the xylem and phloem, water that is absorbed by the root can be transported via the stem to the leaves where it is required for photosynthesis, and the food that is prepared in the leaf can reach different parts of the plant because of the stem, right? So, it helps in the conduction of water as well as food with the help of the vascular bundle elements present within it. Now, these are the primary functions. Similar to how we saw, roots sometimes take up unusual functions and become modified. The stem also could become modified. If a stem is performing functions other than its primary functions, such as storage of food, helping in providing protection, performing photosynthesis, all of that is considered to be modifications of the stem. Okay. So, whenever it is performing functions other than its primary functions, we say that they are modifications and the stem is said to be modified. There are 5 areas in which stems are modified. Firstly, for storage and also for acting as organs of perennation. They provide support, protection, help in photosynthesis and also help in vegetative propagation. So what exactly are those modifications? Let's take a quick look. We'll start off with storage and organs of perennation. There are a lot of plants whose stems are found underground. Remember when I told you that stem is usually the ascending part of the plant? We said it is generally ascending part of the plant. It's not necessary that the stem also always has to be above the ground. There are a lot of examples where stems are found underground. Okay. Some examples include your potato, ginger, turmeric, Amorphophallus and Colocasia. All of these are stems that are found underground. Now, how do you know whether an underground part of a plant is a root or a stem? The general understanding is that anything that is found under the ground is a root. But that's not the case. I mentioned how sweet potato is an adventitious root modification. Right now I'm telling you potato is a stem modification. How can one tell whether an underground part is a root or a stem? I told you that the stem has distinct regions called nodes and internodes. Did I? Well, I think I missed that point. Yeah. So if this is like the stem, this is the stem. There are specific regions on the stem from which the leaves arise. It is from these points that the leaves are arising, right? So these specific points on the stem are referred to as nodes. Nodes are kind of like the junction between the leaf and the stem. It is from that position on the stem, that region on the stem, that the leaf is arising. So node is a part of the stem. And in between two nodes, whatever region is present in the stem, like this region of the stem, in between the nodes, that region is called the internode. In between two nodes, it is called internodes. Such nodes and internodes you do not find in roots. You only find them in stems. Also, axillary buds is something that you cannot find in roots. You obviously find it only in the stems, right? So here, when you look at the underground parts of the plant, if it contains nodes and internodes, then it is considered a stem modification. If the nodes and internodes are absent in that particular plant part, then you consider it as a root. Okay. So in this case, you've seen sometimes where a potato has these they called eyes of the potato. They're nothing but the axillary buds. Okay. So that is characteristic of the stem. And in ginger, you find these distinct ring-like structures that are present. What do those lines represent? Those lines are nothing but the nodes. If you look carefully to these lines, very thin scaly leaves will be attached. Okay. Yeah. So you can see the same in case of turmeric, colocasia, as well as amorphophallus. So all of these are considered stem modifications that are meant to store reserve food. They are found underground. They also act as organs of perennation. What does that mean? Whenever this plant is facing unfavorable conditions, let's say there's not sufficient water in the soil, there's not sufficient, some condition is not optimum, and it is unfavorable for the growth and development of the plant. At that time, the reserve food that is stored in these organs will help the plant survive and overcome those unfavorable conditions. And once the favorable condition returns, this will give rise to aerial parts of the plant. Okay. Now, yeah, let's talk about the modifications of stem meant for support. So stem in some species forms what is called tendrils. These tendrils are formed from axillary buds. Axillary buds are considered to be part of the stem. Okay. If at all a plant has a very weak stem, to help the plant in climbing, these tendrils provide support. There are 4 examples that you will have to remember for stem tendrils. They are found in cucumber. You can see how this is the leaf here. This is the stem. This is the axillary bud. But the axillary bud has formed a coiled tendril-like structure and it's helping the plant. It's providing support to the plant. Okay. Same thing you can see in the case of pumpkins and watermelons and even grapevine. Okay. Now, stems modified for protection by forming thorns. What are thorns? Thorns are also developed from axillary buds itself. Protection from what? What do plants need protection from? From herbivorous organisms, right? If a deer is being chased down by a tiger or a leopard, the deer is an animal, it can move around, it can run away and escape, but plants unfortunately can't do that. If it sees like a cow coming towards it to eat up its leaves, it can't just run away from there, right? So it has different kinds of defense mechanisms. One such defense mechanism that you can find in plants is the formation of thorns with axillary buds getting modified. So what happens, obviously, if a plant, if an animal is going to feed on a plant that has thorns, which are these spiny pointed structures, the mouth parts are going to get damaged. Nobody will want to go and feed on a plant that is so thorny, right? So this kind of protects the plant from herbivory. It prevents other animals from coming and feeding on it. They will not like it, so it will not feed on it. Where can you see such thorns being present? You can find that in citrus and bougainvillea plants. Moving on, there are some stems, very unusual, performing photosynthesis. Normally, in most cases, we say that leaves perform photosynthesis. Stem kind of, bears the leaves, flowers and fruits. That's the norm. But sometimes, the stem takes up the function of photosynthesis. Where do you see this? This can be seen in plants which are growing in highly water scarce conditions like in the deserts. There's very little water available to the plants already. Since the temperature is so high, these xerophytes will end up losing a lot of water by means of transpiration. If a plant has to survive, it requires water. Water is already less in the soil and a lot of it is getting lost in the form of transpiration. So the plant will try and do everything that it can to make sure that it conserves as much water as possible. So what is the problem with having regular leaves that perform photosynthesis? In the leaves, you have a lot of stomata, and through the stomata, a lot of transpiration happens and water loss happens. Now you want the plant to photosynthesize, without which the plant will die. You want photosynthesis, you want to conserve water, but you want to minus the transpiration as much as possible. So what do? You take up the function of the leaf. The stem takes up the function of the leaf. The stem, because it does not have as many stomata as the leaves, will lose a lot less water by means of transpiration. It can conserve a lot of water. Okay. So in this case, when the stem takes up the function of the leaf, when the stem becomes photosynthetic, such a stem is called Phyllotaxy. This can be found in desert plants like Opuntia and Euphorbia. Opuntia has a flat succulent stem, whereas in Euphorbia you have sort of like a cylindrical stem which is also thick and succulent. Okay, so you can see how the stem here unusually is green in color. In most cases, I told you how it turns brown in color as it grows older, which you don't see in these plants. Now let's move on and talk about the stems that are modified for vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation is basically a type of reproduction where using the vegetative parts of the plant such as the root, stem and leaves, newer plants will be obtained. So in this case, the stem is used for obtaining newer plants for vegetative propagation. Okay. So here you have four types. You have runners, you have suckers, you have stolons, and you have what is called an offset. So we look at each one of them, starting with runners. Runners is something that you can see in the case of grass and strawberry. You may have noticed how sometime when you try to pluck out a grass plant from the soil, a string of grass plants will come along with it. You don't get just one plant. That's because here the stem is underground and horizontal, or you can even call it subaerial. Just above the ground you can find horizontally the stem being present. At each node it will have like an aerial part that is upright. Over here what happens is if the older parts kind of die, the newer parts, newer nodes, that will give rise to new plants. Same you can see in the case of strawberry as well. Speaking of stolons, these are similar to runners except the part of the stem that is horizontal, it kind of arches like that. Okay, so in mint and jasmine you can find this. A slender lateral branch arises from the base of the main axis. If this is like the main axis of the stem, from the base of the main axis, very close to it, a small lateral branch towards the side, lateral branch arises. It grows aerially for some time and then arches down. Okay, so I told you it forms like an arch of sorts, right? And then it touches the ground where a new aerial part of the plant will develop. That is stolon. You can see that in mint and jasmine. And then you have what is called an offset. Offset is something that you can find very often in aquatic plants like Eichhornia. Okay, Eichhornia as well as Pistia. Here the plant has a horizontal stem like that. Okay, at each node, this is one node, this is one node. At each node above you have a tuft of leaves with very short internodes, and towards the base, this is a rosette of leaves, and then towards the base you have the tuft of roots present. At each node you can find this. Okay, so a lateral branch with very short internodes, each node bearing a rosette of leaves and a tuft of roots. This can be found in aquatic plants like I already mentioned. Now speaking of a sucker, which can be found in plants like banana, pineapple and chrysanthemum, this particular stem modification, it originates laterally from the basal part of the stem. As you can see in this case, this is the stem, this is the roots, this is the basal part of the stem. From the basal part of the stem it will arise laterally and then it will be underground for a little while. Eventually it will come out and grow obliquely, which means it is kind of like diagonally it will grow and it will give rise to newer leafy parts of the plant. Okay, so that is what a sucker is. So with that we've covered all of the stem modifications. Now it's time we move on and learn about the third vegetative part of a plant, which is the leaf. The leaf is lateral, which means lateral means sides. From the stem, from the sides the leaves will arise, right? So it is lateral. Again, generally green. In most cases it is green. It is flat, right? It's not a thick fleshy organ. It is flat, which is bone on the stem. We already know that. Where do these leaves develop? They develop at the node. I already told you what a node is. Now node is this region from which the leaf will arise. So this is a node. Node is a part of the stem. The region of the stem from which the leaf will arise is the node. Leaves arise from the nodes. That does not make the node a part of the leaf. It is still part of the stem. Okay. So at the axil, the leaves may bear buds, of course. It is called axillary bud. Again, axillary bud or a node is not part of the leaf, it is part of the stem. Where do these leaves arise from? They arise from the meristematic tissue that is present at the tip of the shoot, which is called shoot apical meristem. They are arranged in acropetal succession, which means the older leaves are towards the base. This tip of the stem, which has a shoot apical meristem, it's going to give rise to newer leaves. The newer or younger ones arise from the tip. The older ones are present at the base. So, more newer and newer leaves will arise at the tip. Okay. That is called acropetal succession or acropetal order. Now, what are the different parts of a leaf? A leaf typically has three parts. It has a leaf base, it has a stalk, which is called the petiole, and then you have the large expanded portion of the leaf where major photosynthesis takes place. That is called the lamina or the leaf blade. We'll talk about each of them starting with the leaf base. The leaf base is the bottom portion of the leaf by means of which the leaf is attached to the stem. Now, at the leaf base, you sometimes find small leaf-like paired structures. They are, in most cases, they appear in pairs. Like two of them will be present at the leaf base, and they are called stipules. Stipules may be present or stipules may be absent. If stipules are present, you call it stipulate. If stipules are absent, you call it exstipulate. Okay? Next. These stipules in some plants are swollen. If a stipule, I'm sorry, not stipules, the leaf base is sometimes swollen. If the leaf base is swollen, you call it a pulvinous. Okay. So, it is a swollen leaf base. You can see that in case of plants like pea plant. Here I want you to notice, this is the leaf base portion. This is the stem portion. This leaf base is what is connecting the leaf to the stem. So here you have the petiole. I want you to notice how this region is swollen. Here also this region is swollen. So that is called pulvinous leaf base, and you can find it in some leguminous plants like pea plant. In some cases, the leaf base at least partially or completely encloses the stem. It kind of covers the stem either partially or fully. In that case, you call it a sheathing leaf base. You may have noticed this in case of sugarcane or in the case of maize, mostly in grasses. Like this portion is the stem. Okay. You can see how this is the leaf. This is the leaf base, but this leaf base has kind of covered the stem. Like it covers the stem either partially or fully. Then you call it a sheathing leaf base. The leaf base expands into a sheath like a covering that covers the stem either completely or partially. What do we have next? We have the petiole. Petiole is the stalk of the leaf. Now this petiole also again may be present, may not be present. If the petiole is present, you call it petiolate. Okay. If it is present, you call it petiolate. If the leaf lacks the petiole, you call it sessile. So here you saw that there was no petiole. Is there a stalk sort of a thing for this leaf? It doesn't have a stalk. It has the leaf base, it has the lamina. It does not have the petiole. So you call this sessile. Okay. Yeah. Now, what is the function of the petiole? The petiole allows the leaf blade to flutter in the wind. So when they're moving like that, it gets more access to fresh air around it, so that exchange of gases during photosynthesis or respiration, whatever, happens smoothly. Not only does it help in circulating air around and bringing fresh air to the leaf, the petiole also makes sure that the surface of the leaf is cooled. Okay, so when it flutters in the wind, it is doing two things. It is making sure that it's bringing fresh air to the surface of the leaf. Also, it is helping cool the leaf lamina. These are the two functions of the petiole. What about the lamina or the leaf blade? This is the flat, expanded, usually green portion of the plant. Within this lamina, you can find many veins, the ones that I'm representing in orange color. These are some major veins, and further it will continue to branch and form smaller veins that are called veinlets. So it's spread across and it has veins and veinlets. There's one very important prominent vein at the center, which is called the midrib. Within all of these veins, you will have xylem and phloem present. It is through the veins that food and water gets transported from and to the leaf. So, the veins being present not only helps in conduction and transport of water and minerals, but because it has xylem and xylem has a lot of dead tissue. Phloem also has phloem fiber, which is the dead tissue, hard tissue. It provides mechanical support to the leaf. Okay, so it provides rigidity to the leaf because it has a lot of these fibers present in it, because it's made up of sclerenchyma mostly and dead cells with thick walls. So it provides rigidity and mechanical support to the leaf. If not for the veins, the leaves would have mostly different types of parenchyma and it would tear very easily. It could get damaged very easily. The presence of these veins and veinlets provides stability to the leaf lamina, which we also refer to as the leaf blade. Now, you see in nature that so many different plants have so many different types of leaves. There are a lot of areas in which leaves could differ in their form, right? Shape, size, number, all of that varies. So if you look at its structure, if you look at its shape, it can be variable because of how the margin is. In some, there is a smooth margin. In some leaves, in some, there is some sort of incisions towards the margin. If you look at the tip, some leaves have a rounded tip. Some of them have more like a pointed tip, right? So with respect to the tip or the apex, margin, shape, surface area, how big it is, extent of incision, some of them are like mildly incised, some of them are heavily incised, some of them are so incised that they become compound leaves. So you have different types of leaves that vary in all of these aspects. Now, I told you that all leaves do have veins. There is difference in the arrangement of veins in a leaf in monocots and dicots. Okay, so we call this venation. Venation is how the leaves, how the veins and veinlets are arranged in the lamina. Okay, the arrangement of veins and veinlets in the lamina of a leaf is what we refer to as venation. It is of two types. The first one is called reticulate venation. The second one is called parallel venation. Reticulate venation is something that you routinely see in dicot plants, and parallel venation is something that you come across in monocot plants. What is reticulate venation? Reticulum means network. So, if the veins inside the lamina form a network sort of a structure by branching multiple times, then you call it reticulate venation. What about parallel venation? As the name itself indicates, the veins run parallelly. So this is a banana leaf. Of course, all of you would have had banana leaf meals at least once in your lifetime. I hope so. Okay, so you can see how the veins are running parallelly in this case, right? So that is why it's called parallel venation, and this is common in monocot plants. Now, there are two different types of leaves, simple leaf and compound leaf. And again in compound leaf, there are two types, pinnately compound and palmately compound. What is the difference between a simple leaf and a compound leaf? We'll first understand. What is a simple leaf? In a leaf, this expanded portion, which we call the lamina, has to be entire, which means it has to be very smooth like that. If it is smooth like that without any incision, then you call it simple leaf. Okay, first case. There should be no incision means like these teeth-like structures. That is called incision. Over here, you have an entire lamina with zero incision. So this is a simple leaf. It's also called a simple leaf even when there are incisions. But there's one rule here. One, what do you call it? Condition. So here, incisions may be present. But the incision should not be so deep that it touches the midrib. If the incisions are present and it still doesn't touch the midrib or reach the midrib, then also you call it a simple leaf only. Okay, the lamina is entire, the margin is entire, that is also a simple leaf. Or if it is incised, the incisions do not reach deep enough to touch the midrib, then you call it simple leaf. What happens in a compound leaf? In a compound leaf, the incisions are so deep that it touches the midrib, and eventually what happens is this leaf will end up having many leaflets. Each one of this tiny leaf-like structure is called a leaflet. When it becomes like this, then you call it a compound leaf. Or you have a leaf like this, its incisions are so deep, okay? Its incisions are so deep that it reaches the midrib. Eventually, it will become a compound leaf with different leaflets like this. Then you call it a compound leaf. Now, if you notice here, this compound leaf appears like a feather. This compound leaf appears like the palm of your hand. If it appears like a feather, then you call it pinnately compound leaf. Okay, pinna means feather. So if it's like this, it is called pinnately compound leaf. If it appears like the palm of your hand, where all the leaflets seem to arise from a single point, then you call it palmately compound leaf. So what is a compound leaf? It has incisions for sure, and the incisions are so deep that it reaches the midrib. Because it is reaching the midrib, it is breaking the entire lamina into many small leaflets. Okay, so such leaves are said to be compound leaves. Now you might ask me, if I look at this leaf also looks, this is a compound leaf. We are saying that this entire thing is one leaf. Okay, this is one compound leaf we are saying. But if I look at it, I will feel like this is also a single leaf. How will I know whether this is a leaflet or a leaf? You will know it when you check the axillary buds location. If this was a single simple leaf, axillary bud should have existed here at the axil of these leaves. But in these leaves, axillary buds do not exist here at each leaflet. It exists here. It exists here. So that shows that this entirely is one leaf. Incisions, because of incisions, the entire lamina has been broken down into many small leaflets. That's how you can tell a pinnately compound leaf from a simple leaf, or a palmately compound leaf from a simple leaf. Okay, so that's the difference. Had it been a simple leaf like the one that you see here, okay, so if it is a simple leaf, then at each leaf's axil, you will find the axillary bud. Okay, now that's about the type of leaves. Now let's talk about Phyllotaxy, which is basically how the leaves are arranged on the stem. The arrangement of leaves on the stem is called Phyllotaxy. Phil means leaf. Okay, so here let us take 1, 2, 2 and 3 types. Okay, in all of them there will be nodes, of course. So wherever nodes are there, over there leaves will arise. If at each node only one leaf is arising, and that's alternating at each node. If it's arising on the right side, this time it will be left here. If it's right here, next left. So if it's alternating like that and one node has only one leaf, then you call it alternate phyllotaxy. In opposite phyllotaxy, at each node you have two leaves. Okay, so here you can see, let's draw 1, 2, 3 nodes, 1, 2, 3 nodes. So here at each node you can find 1, 2 leaves. Here 2 leaves. Here 2 leaves. I want you to notice how at each node there are 2 leaves, and each pair of leaves is kind of stacked upon each other parallelly on the same plane. So if this leaf is overlapped by this leaf is overlapped by this one, they are superposed, then you call it opposite superposed. But in some plants what happens is, If this node's leaf is in this direction, the next node leaf, the leaves at the next node, the pair of leaves at the next node, they will be perpendicular to this at right angles. If one node is like this, the next node will be like that. Again, the next node will be like that. It's opposite because each node has two leaves. But since they are at right angles to each other, you call it opposite decussate. In world, what happens is one node will have more than two. So here, if this is like a node, you have more than two leaves. Leaf number 1, leaf number 2, leaf number 3, leaf number 4. All of these are arising from the same node. So you call it world phyllotaxy. Examples for alternate phyllotaxy, of course, you would have seen a hibiscus plant in your life. So you know at each node you have only one leaf and you can see how clearly it is alternating at each node. Same you can see in mustard as well as sunflower plant as well. Speaking of opposite phyllotaxy, you can find opposite superposed type of phyllotaxy in guava and opposite decussate phyllotaxy in calotropis plant. World phyllotaxy can be seen in case of Alstonia. Okay, you can see how from a common node many leaves are arising. Right? Next, let's talk about modifications of the leaf. If a leaf is doing something else other than performing photosynthesis, then we say that the leaf is modified. What are some reasons that the leaf could be modified for? For support, mechanical support and to help in climbing, for defense, storage, it performs photosynthesis sometimes, like, yeah, you learn about it. I'll tell you how it is different. Of course, plants perform, leaves perform photosynthesis, that is its primary function, but I'll tell you how this is a modification. And it also, in some cases in insectivorous plants, it helps in trapping insects. Let's learn about each of these one by one. First, let's start off with leaves being modified for support and to help in climbing. You can see that in the pea plant. Pea plant is a climber. So it has a very weak stem. So it climbs along vertical means of support. So the leaves in these plants, some leaves, and not all of them are tendrils. Some of the leaves in this plant will modify into thin, long, kind of uh, coily kind of things that are called tendrils. Have we heard about tendrils before? Of course, we've heard about tendrils. Tendrils are leaf modifications too. Tendrils can be stem modifications too. In case of cucumber and watermelon and grape vine and all of that, I told you how the axillary bud of the stem becomes the tendril. There it is a stem modification. But in case of a pea plant where the leaf is modifying itself into form a tendril, this is a leaf modification. Tendril is a common word for both that stem modification and this leaf modification. Okay, next we have spines. So what are spines? Spines are these obviously spiny structures that you can find on the cactus plants. So most people get confused between thorns and spines. I'll make it clear for you here. Previously, we learnt about thorns being produced by citrus plants and bougainvillea plants because they are, they want to, deter herbivorous animals from coming and feeding on them. They want to protect themselves against these herbivores. That's why they have produced those thorns. Thorns are modifications of the axillary bud. But here what is happening? In a cactus plant, the axillary bud is not forming the spine. It is the leaf that is forming the spine. Normally, the leaf is supposed to perform photosynthesis. But here, if it performs photosynthesis, because of its expanded kind of structure, because it's more exposed to the sunlight, because it has a lot of stomata, the plant which is already growing in water scarce conditions can lose a lot of water by transpiration, which is why the stem took up the function of photosynthesis. Now, to further reduce water loss, the leaves are not expanded like they usually are. They reduce themselves to the size of spines. They become pointed structures and they are reduced to spines. Obviously, these spines look nothing like leaves because they no longer perform the primary function of leaves. They need not be expanded. Stem has taken up that function. Right now, what must it do? It must protect itself from herbivory and also make sure it reduces the rate of transpiration and conserve water. That is exactly what these spines do. Okay, so when in cactus you have two modifications. The stem is modified, the leaf is also modified. Stem modification is called a phylloclade. Stem performing photosynthesis is phylloclade. Leaf being reduced to spine is a leaf modification, right? So both modifications you find here. Next, for storage of food, we saw how roots stored food, we saw how stems stored food. Leaves also store food. You've seen this in the case of onions and garlic. So the part of onion and garlic that we consume, of course in onions you consume the stem part, inflorescence, all of that too. But in this onion, this part that we consume is actually the fleshy leaves of the onion, which has stored food. Even in garlic, the cloves of garlic, they store food, they are actually the leaves. Okay, so yeah, in both cases you have some leaves that are protective, kind of the ones that are present on the outside, we peel it off and then throw it away. They are scaly leaves that are not obviously fleshy. The inner ones are the fleshy leaves, and that's what we consume. Okay, next we have something called phylloclade, which you can find in plants like Australian acacia. Normally what happens in a leaf is, if this is the leaf, this is the petiole, this is the leaf base, and this is the lamina. The part of the leaf that is mostly involved in photosynthesis is the lamina. But in some cases what happens, the lamina is short-lived, the lamina falls off. In this case, this is the petiole. Okay, so this is the petiole. And this is the lamina. The lamina is short-lived and it falls off very soon. If the plant has to survive, then the petiole itself will perform photosynthesis, which is unusual. In most cases, it is the lamina which is actively involved in photosynthesis, but here, since the lamina part gets detached from the petiole, eventually the petiole, which is kind of expanded here, will take up the function of the lamina and perform photosynthesis. Okay, so here the petiole is modified for photosynthesis. Of course, leaves only perform photosynthesis. So if you think like, okay, leaf performs photosynthesis, what is modification here? It is the primary function. Here, the normal part of the leaf will not perform photosynthesis. The unusual part, like the petiole, will perform photosynthesis. That is why it's modified. Next, leaf is modified to trap insects and insectivorous plants like pitcher plant and Venus flytrap plant. These insectivorous plants usually grow in regions where there's not sufficient nitrogen present in the soil, but without nitrogen, no organism can grow, because for our DNA, for our proteins, nitrogen is essential. Since they're not getting nitrogen from the soil, what they end up doing is they will trap insects, digest the insects, and obtain nitrogen from the insect for their nutrition. So in order to trap insects, different types of insectivorous plants have their own mechanisms. But in the case of a pitcher plant, the leaf itself modifies to a pitcher which is slippery inside. So it will attract the insect. Once the insect lands on the pitcher, it is slippery, it will slip down, and at the base of the pitcher, within the pitcher, like at the bottom, there are a lot of hydrolytic enzymes which will end up digesting the insect, and the nutrients from that insect's body is absorbed by these plants. Same for Venus flytrap. It has like a trap-like mechanism. If an insect lands on the Venus flytrap, the trap will close shut, and then the insect will be digested and its nutrients will be absorbed by these plants, right? So that's about the leaf modification found in insectivorous plants. So with that, we finished root, stem and leaf. All the vegetative parts are covered. Now we have to talk about the reproductive parts. We'll talk about the inflorescence, flower, fruit, seed, all of that. Okay, so we'll start with inflorescence. So you may have noticed how sometimes in some plants there's a solitary single individual flower being formed on the stem, and in some cases you find like a bunch of flowers being produced. Whenever there's like a whole bunch of flowers being produced on the plant, you call it an inflorescence. Okay, so when we're studying the morphology of inflorescence, we basically study about how the flowers are arranged on top of the floral axis. Like you have, oh my god, why is my pen not working? Oh my god, my screen is frozen for some reason. So just like how on the stem, from the stem the leaves arise, from the floral axis flowers will start arising. In an inflorescence, we're basically studying about how the flowers are arranged on what we call the floral axis. So you have two major types of inflorescence. which is called racemose and cymose type of inflorescence. First, we'll talk about what is racemose, what is cymose, and then we'll talk about what is a solitary flower. Okay. So, whenever there's a single flower, you say it is solitary. Whenever you have more than one flower, it can either be arranged in the form of a racemose inflorescence or a cymose inflorescence. What's the difference? We'll find out. First, I'll tell you about racemose inflorescence, then we'll go back to solitary. In a racemose inflorescence, we say that the growth of the floral axis is indefinite. I'll tell you the reason. If you look at this racemose inflorescence, you can find such an inflorescence in a gulmohar plant. Okay. I want you to notice how the size of the flowers, which are represented by these circles, varies. There are bigger circles towards the base of the floral axis, and towards the tip there are smaller flowers. Right. So the size of the flower is increasing. Basically, the size of the flower represents the age of the flower. If it is an older flower, it is shown as a bigger circle. If it is a younger flower, it is represented as a smaller circle. One thing I want you to notice and pay attention to over here is that the tip is not terminated by a flower. The tip is free here. The apical meristem here is not terminating into a floral bud, right? So here meristematic tissues are still intact. Because the meristematic tissues here is still intact, this inflorescence can continue to grow and produce newer flowers at the tip indefinitely, which is why we say the growth of the floral axis is indefinite. Similar to how the leaves were arranged in acropetal succession, even in racemose inflorescence, flowers are arranged in acropetal succession where the youngest flowers is towards the tip and the oldest ones are towards the base. So the newer flowers that will form will always keep getting added at the tip. Like you can see here, these are the older flowers. Here you have floral buds, here even younger buds, even younger buds. At the tip, since the tip has not ended in a flower, meristematic tissue is still intact, it can continue to grow and give rise to newer floral buds. This is the story of racemose inflorescence. Speaking of cymose inflorescence, here the growth is said to be definite. I'll give you a reason for that. If you look at this racemose and cymose and compare it, you know how in racemose the tip is intact, it is not ended with a flower. As opposed to that, if you look at cymose inflorescence, at the tip you have a flower present, right? So whatever meristematic tissue was present at the tip, that has terminated into a flower. Now that there's no more meristematic tissue here, this cannot grow any longer, which is why we say that the growth here of the main axis is definite. Then how does this inflorescence form? How do these other flowers arise? Basically what happens is, if this is the main floral axis, this will produce branches beneath the oldest flower. This is the old flower. This is old flower is present at the tip. Underneath that you have two branches produce. This will produce relatively younger flowers. Again, this axis will give out branches and that will produce even younger flowers. So the young flower is here, the youngest flower is here. Okay, and the oldest flower is at the tip. Such a succession is said to be basipetal succession. Okay, so such type of inflorescence can be found in the jasmine plant. I'm sure everybody has seen a jasmine plant in your life. You can see how at the tip you have the old flower that is fully bloomed. Underneath you have two branches. Again, this one has borne one flower. This has a floral bud. This has branched and this has again produced floral buds that are even younger. Such a type of inflorescence or arrangement of flowers is called cymose inflorescence. Now, speaking of solitary flowers may be taught in this chapter as a separate entity compared to these inflorescence types, but actually solitary flower is also considered to be a cyme, because what happens in a solitary flower is the shoot tip, the shoot apical meristem directly transforms into the flowers. Okay, so if this is the tip of the stem, this will directly give rise to a single flower. That is why it has indefinite axis. That is why it is kind of similar to cymose inflorescence. So we call it a solitary cyme. Some books might refer to this as a solitary cyme. So that's about the solitary flower. You can see that in case of hibiscus. Now, we know that an inflorescence is a cluster or a bunch of flowers. We will have to study about the different aspects of each individual flower. Okay. What are the different parts that you find in a flower? Basically, a flower also has a stalk that is called the pedicel. At the tip of the pedicel, you can find a broad base that is called the thalamus. On top of the thalamus, 4 whorls of the flower are arranged in concentric circles. The outermost circle has sepals. It is made up of small leaf-like structures that protects the flower when it is in the bud condition. Inside the sepals, you have what is called the petals. Okay. So these petals are usually brightly colored in most flowers. Petals help in attracting the pollinators. Next, you have what is called the stamen or androecium. Androecium is the male reproductive part of the plant. Its individual units are called stamens. And inside, innermost part or innermost whorl of a flower, which I am outlining using a pink color here, this is called the gynoecium or the pistil. The individual units here is called carpels. So here, collectively, the sepals are called calyx, petals are called corolla. Androecium is the collective term, gynoecium is the collective term. Individually, androecium is called stamen. Individual, each part of the androecium, each one of these is called a stamen, and here it is called a carpel. Okay. So we will have to learn about each of these parts under the flower topic. Okay. So in some cases, what we see is, wait, I must have a slide which I don't know. Okay. Parts of, yeah. So among these parts that I mentioned just now, the calyx and the corolla, the sepals and the petals, they are considered to be non-essential or accessory whorls because they are not directly involved in the process of sexual reproduction. As opposed to that, the androecium and the gynoecium, they are considered to be essential whorls because androecium is where the microspores will be produced. This is the male reproductive part, and gynoecium is the female reproductive part. Without these, sexual reproduction cannot take place. So they are absolutely essential. So in some plants what happens is, especially in monocots, in a few monocots, you can see how the non-essential whorls are not distinguished into calyx and corolla. They just have one non-essential whorl and they call it the perianth. The whorl is called the perianth and its units are called tepals. Okay, so you can't distinguish between calyx and corolla here. You have just one non-accessory whorl, non-essential whorl, which is called the perianth, and its units are called tepals. You can find that in lilies. Okay. Yeah. Now speaking of flowers, flowers in most cases will have both male reproductive part and female reproductive part. Will have both the androecium and gynoecium. But in some cases, either one of them will be present. Either androecium is there or gynoecium is there. If both androecium and gynoecium are present, then you call it bisexual flower. Mustard is an example for a bisexual flower. Here you have the androecium and here you have the gynoecium. Both are present within the same flower. Unisexual means it either has the male part androecium or the female part gynoecium, which you can see in papaya, in maize plant. Okay, so there is a separate male plant with only androecium, there is a separate female plant with only gynoecium. So you have separate male and female papaya flowers. In that case, you say that the flower is unisexual. There are various ways in which you can classify flowers. One such criterion that we use for classification is whether it has both reproductive structures or only one of them. Next, another way to classify flowers is based on its symmetry. If you can take a flower and, cut it through a plane that passes through the center, if you get two identical halves, if you get like a mirror image, then you call it actinomorphic. So for you to call a flower actinomorphic, the flower should be able to be divided into two equal halves in any plane that passes through the center. For example, right now, if you cut this flower in this plane, okay, this half and this half is equal. If I cut it like this, a plane that passes through the center of the flower, top half, bottom half is equal, is the same. I mean, it's exactly like a mirror image. If I cut it obliquely like this through a plane passing through the center, this part and this part is the same. They're like mirror images, they are exact equal. So, such flowers are said to be actinomorphic. Flowers can be divided into two equal halves in any plane passing through the center. Then you call it actinomorphic. The flower is said to be actinomorphic. Such flowers obviously are displaying radial symmetry. You've learnt about symmetry in animal kingdom, right? So you know there's radial symmetry, bilateral symmetry and all of that. So if it can be cut into two equal halves through any radial plane that passes through the center, you call it actinomorphic or radially symmetrical. Where can you find such flowers? You can find them in mustard, datura, chili. These are the examples. What about zygomorphic? Zygomorphic flowers exhibit bilateral symmetry where if you have a flower, you can get two equal halves from that flower but only through one plane that passes through the center and it is longitudinal. It's a vertical plane. Okay, see here. This flower, if I cut like this, I will get mirror image, like two equal halves I get. But if I cut it like this, is this and this equal? Is this and this the same? It's not. If I cut it like this, it's not the same. So if you can get two equal halves only in one vertical plane that passes through the center, then you say that the flower is zygomorphic or bilaterally symmetrical. Where can you find such flowers? Gulmohar, pea, bean, cassia, all of these are examples. And then you have another category of flowers which are so irregular that no matter which kind of plane you cut the flower through, it will not give you two equal halves. Okay. So a flower cannot be divided into two similar halves in any vertical plane passing through the center. Example for that is canna, a monocot plant. Next, you can classify flowers based on how many appendages are present in it. What do I mean by appendages? The number of sepals, petals and rhizome, all of that. Okay. So, if a flower has floral appendages in multiples of 3, we call it trimerous. Tri means 3. If it has floral appendages in multiples of 4, then you call it tetramerous. If it is in multiples of 5, then obviously what would you call it? We'll call it pentamerous. So that's one way of classifying flowers based on the number of appendages present. Next, another way of classifying flowers is based on whether bracts are present or not. Similar to how the stalk of the leaf, petiole at its base, at the base of the flower, a pair of small leaf-like structures called stipules may be present, may not be present. At the base of the pedicel, which is the stalk of the flower, a single small leaf-like structure may be present or may not be present. If it is present, you say that the flower is bracteate when bract is present. When the bract is absent, you call it ebracteate. These are terms important. We will need it in the future. So pay attention and keep these in mind. Okay. So what is a bract basically? It is a reduced leaf that you find at the base of the pedicel. Okay. Now, another way of classifying flowers is based on the position of other whorls of the flower with respect to the ovary. You have 3 different types. You have hypogynous, perigynous and epigynous. Hypogynous the first one, perigynous the second one. Let me write it here. Hypo first, peri second, epi third. Hypo means below. Peri means around. Epi means above. Gynous here relates to the gynoecium or the ovary. We are talking about how are the other floral whorls arranged with respect to the ovary. Think about the structure of a flower. You have calyx outside, corolla inside, androecium inside, gynoecium innermost. So with respect to the innermost whorl of the flower, how are the remaining outer 3 whorls arranged? Are they arising from below the gynoecium? Are they arising from above the gynoecium? Is everything arising from pretty much the same level? This is what we are looking at. Okay. So here you can see in hypogynous flower, as the name itself indicates, it is arising. The floral whorls are arising below the gynoecium. Okay. So this is the gynoecium. This basal portion that is broad, swollen, this is the ovary. Ovary is occupying the highest position here. It is the topmost. Other whorls like our calyx here, corolla here, androecium, all of them are arising from underneath the ovary, beneath the ovary. So, such a flower is called hypogynous. Other flowers are coming from below hypogynous flower. In a hypogynous flower, since ovaries occupy the highest position, the ovary is said to be superior. Such a type of flower can be found in case of mustard, hibiscus and brinjal plant. Next we have perigynous. In perigynous flower, what happens is the thalamus forms a cup sort of a structure. Okay. So if this is like a cup, the edge, border of the cup is called the rim. Okay. So the thalamus has formed a cup-like structure. At the rim of the thalamus, all the floral whorls will arise. Okay. So here you can see this thalamus has formed the cup. At the rim of the thalamus, at the cups, what do you call it, edge, you can find other whorls arising. Here you have the sepals, here you have the petals, and then here you have the stamen. So exactly at the center of the ovary, the other whorls are arising. Such a flower will have gynoecium at the center. Other whorls will almost be arising from the level of the rim of the thalamus, and the ovary here, if you look here, this is where the other whorls are arising from this line. The ovary here is half superior, half inferior. So we call such an ovary half inferior. This can be seen in plum, peach and rose. Next you have epigynous. Epi means above. In epigynous flowers, the ovary, if this is the ovary and this is the thalamus, the inner wall of the thalamus completely kind of fuses with the outer wall of the ovary. Okay, so here you can see this is the wall of the ovary, and here outside that you have the thalamus. So here the ovary is completely enclosed and fused with the thalamus's margin. All other whorls, if this is the ovary, if this is the ovary level, all of the other whorls are arising from above it, right? So you see, you have sepals here. This is the ovary level. Sepals are arising from above it. Petals are above it. Stamen is above it. So all other whorls will arise from above the gynoecium. Gynoecium occupies the lowermost part of the flower here. So that's why the ovary is said to be inferior and the flower is epigynous. This can be seen in the case of guava, cucumber, and there's a type of floret in sunflower called ray floret. We can see that in ray florets of sunflower as well. Now, we will talk about, we are done with the different types of classification of flowers. We will delve into the individual parts of a flower like calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium and all of that. We'll start off with the calyx. Calyx is the small green leaf-like structures that is found in the outermost whorl of most flowers. So the calyx units are called sepals. The sepals may be fused or they may be free. If they are free, then such a condition is called polysepalous. Like in this case, the sepals are not fused with each other. But in some cases, the sepals fuse with each other and form like a cup-like structure, which you would have seen in hibiscus. Such a calyx where the sepals are fused are said to be gamosepalous. Gamo means fused, marriage. Okay. So sepals are free, polysepalous. Sepals are fused, as in this case, you call it gamosepalous. What do we have next? Same thing with petals. Petals may be free from each other like this, or they may be fused to form like a cup or like a bell-like structure. So, if they are free, you call it polypetalous. If they are fused, you call it gamopetalous. Polysepalous, gamosepalous for calyx, polypetalous, gamopetalous for corolla. Next, there are different ways in which sepals and petals can be arranged with respect to each other. Over here, I'm not talking about how is the sepal arranged with respect to the petal. We are talking about how in one single whorl, either sepals or petals, if you take the calyx alone, how are the sepals arranged with respect to each other? If you take the corolla alone, how are the petals arranged with respect to each other? We will study that, and that is called aestivation. Aestivation is basically studying the arrangement of sepals or petals in a floral bud with respect to each other. Okay, within the same whorl, you have 4 different types here. You have valvate, you have twisted, you have imbricate, and you have vexillary. We'll start off with valvate. Valvate aestivation you can find in Calotropis. Over here what happens? The sepals or petals, as you can see in this case. Okay, so if this is the representation of sepals or petals, you can see that the margins are not overlapping. Okay, so if the flower is like this, it's not like the petal is this petal is overlapping this petal. Okay, so the margin of the petals or sepals do not overlap each other. If at all, they might maximally touch each other at the margin, but the edges do not overlap. The sepals or petals do not overlap. There is no overlapping. They might merely touch each other at the margin. See here, these are the petals. You see no overlapping here at all. Absolutely. Right. Even if it is close to each other, it might barely touch each other like this, but it's never like this will overlap this. Okay, so such a type of aestivation you call valvate aestivation. What do we have next? Twisted aestivation. In twisted aestivation, we find overlapping, and there's a specific direction in which overlapping happens. Okay, I'll show you what that direction is. So you can see here, this is one sepal or petal. This edge of the petal, this end of the petal is inside. This petal is this side of the petal, the same petal is outside. If it is inside, in the next petal, you can see this part will be outside, this part will be inside. Okay, so look at how it is overlapping. This petal is overlapping the previous petal. This one is being overlapped by the next one. So in all of the petals or sepals, you can see that the petals or sepals are half inside, half outside, half inside, half outside. So if this is like a petal, this one will overlap this. This one will further overlap this. So in that way, they will overlap each other. If this side, this petal is being overlapped by this one here, this will be overlapping the previous one. So one margin of the sepal or petal overlaps that of the next one, and so on. So one margin is inside, the other margin of the same petal or sepal is outside. So half in, half out, half in, half out. That is how it is. You can see that very clearly in hibiscus plant. See here, this is outside here, but it is inside here. This is being overlapped by this petal here, and this one is overlapping the next petal. So it will have like a twisted sort of aestivation. Next, what we have is called imbricate aestivation. In imbricate aestivation also we do find overlapping, but this overlapping doesn't happen in any particular direction. Okay, I forgot to give you examples here. So you can find twisted aestivation in China rose, lady's finger and cotton flower. You can find valvate aestivation in case of Calotropis. These are the examples. Now we'll take a look at imbricate aestivation. So here you can see this is the petal or sepal. On either sides, this petal is overlapped. So this is in here, in here. One petal is fully inside. This petal is fully outside. On both sides, it's overlapping. And some petals are half in, half out, half in, half out, half in, half out. It does show overlapping, but it does not happen in any particular direction. So then you call it imbricate aestivation. Such a type of aestivation can be seen in the petals of cassia as well as gulmohar. Next, we'll talk about one special type of aestivation which is called vexillary or papilionaceous aestivation. This is specifically found in the petals of pea family. Okay, so here typically there will be 5 petals. This is specifically about petals. Okay, there will be 5 petals. These 5 petals differ in size. There will be one large petal that is called the standard. 2 relatively smaller petals are present. They are called the wings. 2 even more smaller petals are present. They are called the kale petals. What happens here is, The large petal, the standard petal, is huge, and this is posterior in position. Posterior means like if this is the stem and this is the flower, the part of the flower towards the stem or towards its axis, it's called the posterior end. Whichever part I am looking at here, which is visible closer to me, that is called the anterior part. Are you getting it? Look here. Yeah, maybe here you can see. Yeah. So if this is the flower that I'm looking at, the part that is closer to the axis is the posterior part, the part that is away from the axis, this side towards me, that is the anterior part. Okay. So towards the posterior side, in this case, this is the axis, right? Towards the posterior side, you have this one. So that is your standard petal. Now this is a huge petal. This will overlap two relatively smaller petals that are called the wing petals. This will further overlap two even smaller petals that are called keel petals, and the keel petal, the two keel petals, they are fused. You have a total of 5 petals. This is 1, these are 2, and these are 2, but they are fused. Why do we call it papilionaceous corolla or papilionaceous aestivation? Papilionaceous means butterfly-like. So if you look here, this does look like a butterfly. The way the petals are, doesn't it appear like a butterfly? That's why it is called butterfly-like or papilionaceous corolla. Next, that's about the petals. Now let's talk about androecium. Androecium is the collective term used to represent the male reproductive part of a flower. Its individual units are called stamens. Okay, so in a stamen, you will have two parts, a filament, which is a long slender structure, and it will have the anther, which is this knob-like structure present at the tip. The anther generally has 2 lobes, and within each lobe, it will have 2 pollen sacs in most cases. Of course, there are exceptions. In each lobe, there are 2 pollen chambers. If there is an anther that is sterile, not capable of producing pollen grains, not capable of involving in reproduction, then you call it a staminode. Okay. Now let's talk about the stamens. Similar to how the sepals could be free or fused, petals could be free or fused, the stamen also can be free or it can be fused. The stamens can be fused among themselves or they may be fused with other whorls like the petals or the perianth, the tepals. If at all the stamens are fused or attached with the petals, then you call it epipetalous condition. Epi means above. It is attached to the petals. Remember, the petals and the androecium are immediate neighbors, right? So if the petal is here and the androecium is kind of fused to the petal, then you call it epipetalous condition. In such a case, the stamens are difficult to peel off from the surface of the petal because they are physically attached to each other. Likewise, if it is attached to the tepals or the perianth, you call it epiphyllous. If it is attached to the perianth, you can see that in lily. This one you can see in brinjal, tomato and all, epipetalous. What if it's attached to its own members? If the stamens are fully free, not attached among themselves, not attached to other whorls, you call it polyandrous. Polysepalous, polypetalous, polyandrous. If it is attached, all the stamens can be attached to form one bundle, which we call monoadelphy. Adelphous means united. Mono means one. Monoadelphy means all the stamens are combined to form one bundle, as you can see in the case of hibiscus. I'm sure you would have seen many of these small slender stuff with yellow dots at its tip. All of them are stamens. They are fused to form one bundle. So that is monoadelphous. You can find diadelphous condition in case of pea plant where there are a total of 10 stamens. 9 of them fuse to form one bundle and 1 of them is separate. So this is called diadelphous. Both of these are considered to be one bundle. So you have diadelphous condition, characteristic feature of pea plant, pea family. Okay, characteristic this is. Next you have polyadelphous. As the name itself indicates, if there is more than 2 bundles that the stamens are fused to form, then you call it polyadelphous condition. You can find this in citrus plants like lemon and orange and lime and all of that. Okay. Polyandrous condition you can find in the case of lotus. You can see how the stamens are not fused with each other or with other whorls. Next, you can see how in different species the length of the stamens also is variable. I mean to say within the same flower, stamens will be of different lengths. Okay. So, in case of salvia, you have a total of 4 stamens. Of the 4 stamens, 2 are long and 2 are short. Such a condition is said to be didynamous. In the case of mustard, you can find a total of 6 stamens, of which the outer 2 are short and the inner 2 are inner 4 are comparatively longer. Such a condition is called tetradynamous condition. 4 are long inside, 2 outside ones are short. In salvia didynamous condition, you have 2 short and 2 long. Okay. Now, speaking of gynoecium, we are done with androecium and its variations we've seen. We'll talk about gynoecium. Gynoecium is also called the pistil. It is the female reproductive part of the flower. The individual units of a pistil or gynoecium are called carpels. The number of carpels varies from species to species, and some only one is present and some many are present. If you look at the different parts of a gynoecium, you have 3 distinct parts. You have the stigma, which is this top, broad, mostly sticky part of the gynoecium. And then you have this long, slender style. And at the base, you have this swollen region, which is called the ovary. So these are the 3 parts. You have the stigma on top, style in between, ovary at the base. Within the ovary, you can find many ovules being present. Okay. Stigma is the style and this is the ovary. And within the ovary, what you have are called ovules. Ovules in future will become the seeds of the plant. Okay. Where are these ovules attached? Ovules are attached in the ovary to a soft cushion-like tissue, which is called the placenta. Now, the number of carpels is variable, I told you. It may have one carpel, gynoecium, or it can be many carpels. If there is only one carpel present, you call that monocarpellary. Mono means one. Such a carpel can be seen in, such a gynoecium can be seen in the case of wheat. Sometimes the number of carpels is more than one. Multi means many. When there is more than one, they can be fused or they can be free. If it is free, you call it apocarpus. If it is fused, you call it syncarpus. Apocarpus ovary, apocarpus gynoecium, you can find in lotus and rose. And syncarpus, you can find in mustard and tomato. Okay. Now, let's talk about placentation. I told you how inside the ovary, there is a structure called placenta. It is to this placenta that ovules are attached. In different species, you have different ways in which ovules are attached to the placenta. Depending upon how exactly the ovules are attached to the placenta, you have different types of placentation. Okay, so let's talk about the different types of placentation. It is basically the arrangement of ovules within the ovary. The first one is called marginal placentation, and you would have come across this in peas and beans. What happens here is, this is the dorsal side of the pea. This is the ventral side of the pea. At the ventral side of the pea, you can see if you open it up like that. Okay, so assuming this is the ventral side of the pea, here they are joined, right? Here in the fruit, they are joined both dorsally and ventrally. But at the ventral side, wherever there is a joint, which is called the suture, there is a ridge. There is a slightly elevated area present. Okay, so this region is slightly elevated. So this itself is the placenta. The ridge itself acts like the placenta, and over there in 2 rows, you can find ovules being attached. Right? So ovules are borne on this ridge forming 2 rows. You can find that in peas and beans and that entire family. Next, what we have is called axial placentation. Axial means there is an axis. So in axial placentation, the placenta forms a central axis here, and in axial placentation you can find that the ovary is multilocular, which means it has many chambers like that. So in a multilocular ovary there is a central axis which is the placenta. This central axis that I am showing you right now is the placenta, and to the central axis the ovules will get attached. And such a placentation is called axial placentation. You can come across that in case of tomatoes, lemons. Lemon, if you've cut, you've noticed where the seeds are present. At the center, there is an axis. It has many locules, right? You can see it there. And you can also come across this in tomatoes and in China rose. What do we have next? Parietal. Parietal means periphery. So what happens here? This is the ovary. What you're looking at here are sections, okay? So if this is a pea, we've cut it like this. If this is the pea pod, we've cut it like this longitudinally. So what you're looking at here is the LS of a pea fruit. What you're looking at here is the transverse section. You take a lemon, which we have for example, cut it horizontally and look at it from above. Here's what it's going to look like. So this is a transverse section. Again, for parietal placentation, we are taking like a transverse section. So what do we do in, how exactly are the ovules arranged in parietal placentation? We'll see. So what happens here is, this is the ovary, right? So we have the ovary and this is the ovary's wall. Ovary is a swollen structure. You're taking a section of it. This is like the TS of the ovary. If you take a section of the ovary, you have the wall of the ovary and you have the chamber inside. In the wall, you have the outer part, outer wall, and then you have the inner wall, right? So if you look at this inner wall that I am right now outlining, to the inner wall of the ovary, in the inner wall, placenta will develop, and from that placenta, onto that placenta, ovules are attached. Okay? So ovary is one single chambered here. There is a one chambered ovary. Ovules develop on the inner wall of the ovary. You can see here clearly when the flower is formed, the ovary will not have any septa. There are no chambers, but eventually what happens is the placenta in some cases grows deeper and deeper, and later, in the later part, it will form a septum which was not always there from the beginning. It is called a false septum or a repulum. Because of the formation of this false septum or repulum, in the later part, the ovary will form two chambers. It becomes two chambered because of the formation of this repulum or false septum. Such a type of ovary can be found in mustard and argemony. Next, what we have is free central placentation, which looks a lot like axial placentation. Look at this. This is axial, that is free central. You can see in both cases at the center the ovules are attached. But the difference is here you have many chambers. It is a multilocular ovary. Over there are no chambers. So that is free central placentation. You can find that in dianthus and primrose. So there is a central axis to which ovules are attached. The central axis is the placenta, but there are no chambers because there are no septa in between. Septa are absent. So that is why you call it free central placentation. This can be observed in primrose and dianthus. Finally, we have basal placentation. This is also a transverse section. Like you have a fruit, you've horizontally cut it. You have the ovary, you've horizontally cut it and look at it from the microscope. Okay, from above. Finally, we have basal placentation. As the name itself indicates, if this is the ovary, at the base of the ovary, you will have the placenta, and that's where the seed will be attached or the ovule will be attached. Over here, what you're looking at is a longitudinal section. If this is the ovary, you're cutting it like this. In these three previous times, we had cut it like this. Now we are cutting it like this. In marginal and basal, this diagram shows longitudinal section. In axial, parietal and free central, you have a transverse section. So here the placenta develops at the base of the ovary. There is one single ovule attached to it. This can be found in the case of sunflower and marigold. Both belong to the same family. Okay, so that's about placentation. Now, here is a slide where you have all the different types of placentation along with your examples. Examples are very, very important in this chapter. So make sure you use these notes and memorize all of the examples. What do we have next? We have to learn about the fruit and about the seed. Let's talk about the fruit first. Fruit is a characteristic feature of flowering plants. Flowers are also produced only in flowering plants. Fruits are also produced only in flowering plants. Okay. So in most cases, fruits are formed after fertilization process. But in some cases, even without fertilization, fruits will form. If fruits are formed without fertilization, you call them parthenocarpic fruits, and such fruits are going to be seedless. Of course, you've learnt about this in the chapter Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants, right? So fruit is basically the ovary which transforms into the fruit after fertilization. It's a post-fertilization structure. In a fruit, you have two parts. You have the wall of the fruit, and within the fruit, you will have seeds. The wall of the fruit is called pericarp. I already told you earlier when I was talking about perigynous that peri means around. So over here also peri means around and carp means fruit. So the surrounding part of the fruit is called the pericarp, and the pericarp has three distinct layers. It has an outer epicarp, epi means outside, in between mesocarp, meso means in between, inner endocarp. Okay. So as an example, you have to study about one type of fruit which is called the drupe. Example of drupe you can find in coconut and mango, they are both drupes. A drupe kind of fruit develops from a monocarpellary superior ovary. Monocarpellary means that ovary, that gynoecium has only one carpel. The ovary superior means the flower is hypogynous. Okay. So what happens here? This is a single seeded, one seeded fruit. Here I'll tell you first the different parts of the fruit in mango. The peel of the mango is the epicarp, which we discard, the leathery part. Inside that, the part that we consume is the mesocarp. The part that we throw away, the hard part, is called the endocarp. If you break open that hard part, inside that will be the seed in a mango. What about a coconut? In a tender coconut, the outer shiny leathery part, that one is called the epicarp. In between fibrous part, that is called the mesocarp. This hard shell that you have, that is the endocarp. The part of the coconut that we consume is not a part of the fruit. It is part of the seed. It is not a part of the fruit wall. It is a part of the seed. It is the endosperm of the coconut that we consume. Okay, so the edible part in a coconut fruit is the endosperm. The edible part in a mango is the mesocarp. Okay, yeah. So that's about the fruit. Now speaking of the seed, after fertilization, ovary transforms into the fruit. After fertilization, ovule transforms into the seed. The seeds are of two types in angiosperms. You have monocotyledonous seed and you have dicotyledonous seed. Monocot seed has only one cotyledon. Dicot seeds have two cotyledons. Okay, so that's the only difference. More about what these cotyledons are, what are the different parts of a seed, all of that we've discussed already in the chapter Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants. It's repetitive, so I will not repeat the same thing over here again. So with that, we've completed the morphological aspects of root, stem, leaves, flower, fruit, seed. So now we have to move on and learn about how you can semi-technically describe a flowering plant. Okay, so this is important. So let's say you've decided you want to be a taxonomist or you want to pursue botany, a pure science subject, and you want to describe a plant. Okay, so you shouldn't go like, okay, this plant is this much tall, it has a stem and the stem has hair and the stem has one leaf at each node. In the leaf, the veins are arranged in the form of a network. You shouldn't be writing paragraphs. So how do you semi-technically describe a flowering plant using the terms that we've learned so far? So from the beginning of the chapter, we've been learning about different new terms, right? When it is fused, it's called a certain name. When the appendages are free, it's called a certain name. When the petals are arranged in this manner, it's called a separate name. So you have all of these terms that we've learned throughout the course of this lecture from the beginning. We tend to use those terms and describe the plant in short, simple words than writing paragraphs. So that is our semi-technical description of a flowering plant. So over here, using just a few words, many morphological features can be described. Okay. Again, like I mentioned, there is a specific order that we follow here. You're describing it using technical terms, no big paragraphs. It has to be short, it has to be crisp and brief and give you all the necessary information. And you can't randomly write about different parts of the plant. You should follow the same order in which we've studied in this chapter. first starting with maybe the habit, whether it's a shrub, a herb or a tree. Then you'll talk about its distribution, where all is this plant distributed across the planet, and then we'll start talking about the vegetative characters, starting from the root, stem, leaf, then flower, fruit, seed, all of that. Okay. So here it must happen in a proper sequence, starting with habit, then with vegetative characters, and eventually with floral characters. Following that, I will teach you something called floral formula and floral diagram. So that entirely gives us the semi-technical description of a flowering plant. So what are some of the symbols that we use in a floral diagram? I'll tell you. I told you that we still have to study about floral formula and floral diagram, right? So in a floral formula, the heading is wrong. It's not a floral diagram. This is floral formula. In a floral formula, we use many letters and symbols to represent different floral parts. By just looking at the floral formula, you can talk about or find out about different floral features, morphological features. Now, I mentioned earlier that a flower can have a bract or a bract may be absent, right? If that flower, the particular flower that we're trying to describe, the particular plant we're trying to describe, if its flower has a bract, then you call it bracteate, you represent it with BR. BR means it's bracteate. If it doesn't have bract and is ebracteate, then you write EBR. You represent calyx with capital letter K. The number of sepals calyx has is represented as a subscript. If the calyx has 5 sepals, then you write K 5 at the base, like a subscript. If the sepals are free, you leave it as it is. Okay. If the sepals are fused, you enclose the 5 within brackets. Same thing for corolla. Corolla is represented as P. The number of petals will be the subscript. If it is free, no brackets. If it is fused, you enclose it within brackets. If the flower does not have separate distinct calyx and corolla but has a single non-essential whorl, perianth, then you represent that with P. Again, the number of tepals will be the subscript. If it is free, no brackets. If it has fused, then you enclose it within brackets. Then we have the male reproductive part, which is the androecium. Androecium is represented by A. The number of stamens will be the subscript. Again, if they are free, no brackets. If it is fused, then you enclose it within brackets. Sometimes we've noticed how the stamens can be attached to the petals or the perianth. If it is attached to the petals, you will draw a line linking A and C. C is for petals, right? So this arch will indicate androecium is attached to the petals. If it is attached to the perianth, then A to P, one small link. Okay, one arch. What do we have next? We have gynoecium represented by G. The number of carpels will be the subscript. If it is free, no brackets. If it is fused, you enclose it within brackets. Then you can also indicate whether the flower is epigynous, perigynous, hypogynous here. If you draw a line under G, that means the flower is hypogynous and ovary is superior. If you, okay, so there's a mistake here. The line is, it. If the line is above, then it indicates it is an inferior ovary. If the line is on the side, it indicates it is half inferior ovary. Next, if you have actinomorphic flower, then you represent that with a cross within a circle. If it is zygomorphic, percentage symbol. If it is bisexual, then it is like this. If it is unisexual, if it has only male part, then it is like this. A staminate flower. If it has only male flower, a male part, then it is called staminate. If it has only gynoecium, then you call the flower pistillate. So staminate and pistillate conditions are represented like this. So these are some of the formulae that we use. Now, let's talk about the floral diagram. The floral diagram is kind of like a cross section of the flower if you think about it. In a floral diagram, we represent the different worlds of a flower in a schematic representation, starting from outer sepals to petals to androecium and gynoecium, all of that we represent. Okay. So, this will provide us information about the number of parts of a flower. How many sepals are there? How many petals are there? How many stamens? How many carpels? All of that you will get information from looking at the floral diagram. How are they arranged with respect to each other? The aestivation you can find out. What relation they have with one another? Are the stamens attached to the petals? Are the stamens attached to the tepals? Are the stamens fused among themselves? See, all of that you can find out. Cohesion and adhesion between different parts, all of that you can find out. Okay. So, basically in a floral diagram, you have this big dot that you can find. This is called the mother axis. What is mother axis now? I'll tell you. See, if this is the stalk, this is the axis and the flower is present like this. The floral diagram, when you're drawing, this main axis represents the mother axis. Like for example, if you consider vexillary aestivation in case of pea plant, with respect to the axis, the standard petal will always be here. The keel petals will always be towards this side. So, for a flower, the mother axis, with respect to the position of the mother axis, however the floral whorls are arranged, they all will be arranged the same way in every flower. It's not like in one pea flower, standard is here, the large petal is present here, and in another flower, it can be present here. It's not like that. Genetically, it is fixed. With respect to the position of the mother axis, the flowers are arranged all the time exactly in the same way. Okay, so the position of the mother axis with respect to the flower is represented by a small dot on top of the floral diagram. Calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium, they are, represented in successive whorls. What you're looking at here is a floral formula of Brassicaceae family. This is the mustard family. Over here, the outermost whorl is the sepals. The sepals are usually represented like this. It will have these pointed structures. So over here, you have one sepal, 2, 3, 4. 4 sepals are there. Inside that, you have petals that are represented like this. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 sepals are there, 4 petals are there. Inside you have stamens. Remember in mustard family we saw how the stamens are tetradynamous. You have a total of 6 stamens, 2 outer stamens, 1 and 2. Inside you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Outer stamens are longer, inner stamens are outer stamens are shorter, inner 4 stamens are longer. Inside that you have the gynoecium. The gynoecium is here, placenta is here, and the ovules are also represented. Okay, so using this, you can find out about how is the aestivation, is there any cohesion, adhesion in the plant, in the flower, all of that you can make out. Okay, so this is the floral diagram. By looking at this, can we write the floral formula? Yes, we may. So how many sepals are present here? 4 sepals are present. So we will write that as K4. Are they fused? Not fused. If they are fused, there will be joints here, but it's not joined. So K4. Corolla, how many do we have? We have 4. That is also not fused. Androecium, how many do we have? We have a total of 6, out of which 2 are in the outer whorl, 4 are in the inner whorl. So we'll write it as 2 plus 4. Why not 4 plus 2? Because we're going from outside to inside. This is the outermost whorl, then you have the inner second whorl, then you have the third whorl, then you have the fourth whorl. Inside you have gynoecium, and gynoecium has 2 carpels. Here the gynoecium, the carpels are fused, so you will enclose that within bracket. This is a case of superior ovary hypogynous flower, so that also I will represent. This will give me the floral diagram of mustard family. So you have to describe 5 different angiosperm families like this. You will have to describe it using the terms that we've learned so far: habit, distribution, vegetative parts, reproductive parts, and then learn about its floral formula and floral diagram. Okay, so for 5 families you have to do this as a part of your NEET syllabus. So you have Brassicaceae, which is this family that we just learnt about. And following that, you have pea family, which is called Fabaceae or Leguminosae. And then you have Malvaceae, which is the hibiscus family. And after that, you have Compositae or Asteraceae, which is the sunflower family. And then you have the grass family, which is called Graminae or Poaceae. So all about these 5 families you have to learn. Of all these families, only about Fabaceae you have in old NCERT, but the other 4 families there's no information given, so you have to learn it afresh. Okay, so pay attention now. We'll start off with Brassicaceae. Brassicaceae is also called cruciferae. Okay, cruciferae because crucifer means cross. The petals of mustard flowers or the family mustard family flowers, it appears like a cross. That's why it's called cruciferae. Now, Brassicaceae is also called mustard family. Remember, we are not doing this for a particular species. We are doing it at a family level. So within the family, of course, you will have a lot of different variation. So this is not one specific species. This is not just for mustard. All the plants that belong to the mustard family Brassicaceae are being described right now semi-technically. Okay, so we'll talk about distribution is distributed worldwide. Across the globe, you can find different species of Brassicaceae plants existing. Habit. In this family, you don't find big trees. All you find is herbs and shrubs. Okay. Next, we'll talk about the vegetative characters since this is a dicot family. In fact, in your syllabus for NEET, all the families that you have are dicot except for Poaceae or Graminae, which is a monocot family. The remaining 4 families are dicot families. We already know that in dicots, the root system is going to be taproot system. How is the stem? The stem is erect, upright. Okay, erect means upright. It grows upright. It is hairy on the surface and it is a solid stem, meaning it is not hollow like a bamboo stem. It has a solid stem. How are the leaves here? I gave you the example when I spoke about alternate phyllotaxy along with mustard. Along with hibiscus and sunflower, I showed you the mustard leaf and I told you, look, this is also alternate, right? So at each node, you will find only one leaf. So that is alternate. In most cases, the leaves are simple. Very rarely it can be compound. What that means is, in most species, it is simple. In some species, it is compound. It can't be that in the same species, sometimes it is simple, sometimes it is compound. For every species, that feature is fixed. But within this family, there are many species of which most of them show simple leaves. A few of them show compound leaves. Stipules are absent, so we'll call it exstipulate. Since this is a dicot plant, you can observe reticulate venation here. And this plant does not have the petiole, so it is said to be sessile. That's about the leaf. We are done with the vegetative characters. Let's move on and learn about the floral characters, starting with inflorescence. In mustard family, you find racemose type of inflorescence. How is the flower here? The flower does not have bract, so it is abracteate. However, it has a pedicel, so it is pedicellate. It has both male and female reproductive parts, so it is bisexual. It shows radial symmetry, so it is said to be actinomorphic, and it has appendages in multiples of 4, so we say it is tetramerous. It has 4 sepals, 4 petals like we saw earlier. Okay, now how is the calyx here? Like I mentioned, calyx has 4 sepals, corolla has 4 petals. Were they fused? I showed you in that floral diagram. They were not fused. So they were free. If they are free, how do you call it? The sepals are free, polysepalous, petals are free, polypetalous. What kind of aestivation did we find in the sepals? We saw imbricate aestivation. What about the petals? The petals show valvate aestivation, but the petals here are said to be long clawed. That means if this is like the petal, it will have a claw of sorts at this at the tip. So you say that it is long clawed. Talking about the male reproductive part, andrecium, there are a total of 6 stamens. Okay, and they are not fused, so it is polyandrous. However, they are not all arranged in the same whorl. You have 2 whorls. Outer 2 are shorter, the inner 4 are longer. So it is arranged in 2 whorls, outer 2 short, inner 4 long. That is called tetradynamous condition. Did I say inner 2? I meant inner 4. Okay. So outer 2 are short, inner 4 are long. What about the gynoecium? It has 2 carpels like I showed you in the floral diagram, and they had fused, so it is syncarpous. If they fuse, there's only one chamber inside, that is unilocular. What kind of placentation do we see here? When I told you about parietal placentation and how it forms a false septum, I had given you the example of mustard, right? So in mustard family, you find parietal placentation. The style is short here and the stigma is bilobed. Bilobed means it will be like this. Okay, so it will have two lobe-like structures, the stigma. The fruits here are called calyx. In a mustard fruit, you know, many seeds will be present. So the number of seeds is more and they are non-endospermous. Non-endospermous means within the mature seed, endosperm will not be present. It would have been used up. Okay. Now let's take a look at its floral formula and floral diagram. I had already discussed this earlier. It is actinomorphic, it is bisexual, it has, what is this? The sepals arranged in two whorls. Oh wait, the calyx, there's two each in each whorl. Then you have corolla, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. Then you have andrecium. Andrecium arranged in two whorls. You have two shorter ones outside and four longer ones inside. And then you have gynoecium. Gynoecium, you have two carpels that are fused. So two enclosed within brackets. Since this flower has a superior ovary, you will draw a line underneath G. However, you can't see that in the floral diagram. That can be represented only in the floral formula. Whether the flower is hypogynous, epigynous, perigynous, a floral diagram will not indicate. From a floral formula, you can get to know that. Okay. Next. What are some economically important plants in the family Brassicaceae or cruciferae? We have vegetables such as radish, cabbage, mustard, cauliflower, broccoli, which we use on a regular basis. Then we have mustard oil, which is used a lot for cooking. Many ornamental plants such as dame's violet, candy tuft, spider flower, all of these are grown for its aesthetic or ornamental value. So these are some of the plants belonging to Brassicaceae that are economically important. Let's talk about Fabaceae, which is also called Leguminosae. Earlier, this used to be called Papilionoideae because it has butterfly-like petals. It used to be like a subfamily of Leguminosae. It is also distributed all over the world. These are also mostly herbs and shrubs and rarely you will find trees too. Talking about its vegetative parts, roots. Since this is a dicot family, you have taproot system here, but there is one speciality. If this is the root, within the roots of some of these family members, you can find nodules like swollen structures, swollen regions where nitrogen fixation happens. So sometimes they may have nodules. The stem may be erect or it may be a climber. How do we know it can be a climber? We learnt about leaf tendrils as a leaf modification and I gave you the example of pea plant which belongs to this family. So we know that some of these stems can be weak and can be climbers. How are the leaves here? The leaves here are alternate. In most cases they are simple but sometimes they may be pinnately compound too. The leaf base is swollen. I told you and gave you the example of pea plant. So it is called pulvinous leaf base. There are no stipules here, so it is exstipulate, and venation is reticulate because it is a dicot plant, right? Next, floral characters. Inflorescence is racemose type again. The flower is bisexual, meaning it has both stamen and pistil. It is zygomorphic. For the example of zygomorphic, I gave you a plant only. Calyx, they are 5 in number. They are fused, so it is gamosepalous. You may find valvate aestivation in some species and imbricate aestivation in a few others. Speaking of the corolla, you know here you find the characteristic papilionaceous corolla where there are a total of 5 petals, of which there is one large petal called the standard and then 2 smaller petals called the wings, and then enclosing that you have 2 even smaller petals called the keel, which is fused. Okay, so you can find vexillary aestivation here. Andrecium, we've learnt about that too. Here you can find diadelphous condition where there's a total of 10 stamens of which 9 are fused to form one bundle and one is separate. So you can find diadelphous condition. The anthers here are dithecous. How is the gynoecium? The ovary here is superior. It has a single carpel. It has a single chamber, unilocular. Many ovules are there and a single style is there. What kind of placentation do we find here? We find marginal placentation. Fruits are called legumes. Obviously, inside the beans and pea plant, you would have seen inside the fruit there are many seeds present. So, one to many seeds are present. Most of the seeds are non-endospermic in this particular plant family. If you have to look at its floral formula and floral diagram, obviously these are zygomorphic. If you cut it along this plane, you will get two equal halves, but you cut it across any other plane passing through the center, you don't get two equal halves. Then this has both androecium and gynoecium, so it is said to be bisexual. You have a total of 5 sepals that are fused, that is why K subscript 5 enclosed within brackets. Corolla, you have a specific type here, characteristic type here. There is one large petal here which is represented as 1. Then you have 2 smaller overlapping that are overlapped by the large petal. The wing petals, that is plus 2, C subscript 1 plus 2 plus 2 more which are fused. So for the last 2 you will enclose within brackets, and this is to show that these 2 petals are fused. Speaking of androecium, again you have a total of 10, but you won't write it as 10. You will write it as 9 within brackets because these 9 have fused to form a bundle, and one separate will be plus 1. In gynoecium, you have only one carpel with marginal placentation. You have superior ovary, so you will draw a line underneath here. So here also in the diagram you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sepals that are fused. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so look at the representation very clearly. And these are the stamens, 9 here plus 1, and this is the carpel. Of course, the mother axis has to be represented. Economically important Fabaceae members, a lot of our pulses are belonging to this family. Your beans, different types of beans, gram, soya bean, moong, all of that. Many edible oils also we obtain from this family, soya bean oil, groundnut oil and all of that. Dyes, indigofera. You know, indigo dye is used for dyeing the hair, for dyeing fabrics and all of that. So that we obtain from this plant. Sun hemp is a plant belonging to this family. From that fibers are extracted. For fodder, sesbania and trifolium are grown. Many plants produce beautiful butterfly-like petals which are very pleasing to look at. So lupin, sweet pea can be grown as ornamental plants too. And mulethi is a medicine, has medicinal value, so that can also be used. Okay, in many of these Ayurvedic formulations, you would have heard of the term mulethi, right? So that is a plant which is used, which has medicinal value. Now, what do we have? We have the hibiscus family, which is also called the mallow family. They are also distributed all over the world. In that family, you have species that can be herbs, shrubs or trees. Speaking of its vegetative characters, the root obviously has a taproot system because it's a dicot, and nodules is for which one? Fabaceae, not for Malvaceae. So it has a regular taproot system. How is the stem? Stem is generally erect and solid. Leaves are alternate. Leaves are mostly simple. They are petiolate. They have a stalk. You would have seen a hibiscus leaf. Stipules may be present in most cases, and since it's a dicot, it shows reticulate venation. I was going to say veticulate venation, but yeah. Next question, how are the floral characters? The inflorescence here is cymose. I told you it's a solitary cyme, right? In most cases, it is a cymose. So it's generally solitary cyme. The flower has bracts, may or may not have bracts. In some species, bracts are present, in some it's absent. So it may be bracteate or ebracteate. It is definitely hypogynous, actinomorphic. Pedicel is very clearly visible. Pedicellate, it has both the sexes, both the male and female reproductive parts. So bisexual, it has 5 appendages in multiples of 5. So it is pentamerous. Here, addition to calyx and corolla, you have another non-accessory whorl, which you can see here. Okay. Yeah. So this is present below the calyx, and this is called epicalyx. Their number varies from species to species. It can vary anything from 3 to 8. Okay. So how are the sepals here? Sepals, as you can see, they have fused. There will be a total of 5 sepals, all of which are fused. So it is called gamosepalous. And you can see valvate aestivation there. No overlapping. Then if you look at the corolla, of course, you will see twisted aestivation. And the petals number is generally 5. It's not fused, so it's polypetalous. Andrecium, you have so many, a lot of stamens will be present, but they're all fused to form a bundle. So we call that monoadelphous condition. For monoadelphi, I had given you the example of China roses or hibiscus. So you know that. Gynoecium has 5 carpels and it is fused. So syncarpus, it has many locules inside. I gave you the example of hibiscus for axial placentation. So you know that it has an axis and it has multiple locules. So the ovary here is superior and it shows axial placentation. The fruits are called capsule or schizocarp. The seeds have 2 cotyledons because it's a dicotyledonous family and they sometimes do contain endosperm within it. Now if you have to talk about the floral formula, it is actinomorphic, so plus within a circle. It is bisexual, so this symbol. There is epicalyx 3 to 8, you will represent that. Calyx, you have 5, it is fused, so enclosed within brackets. Then you have corolla 5, not always fused, so this has to be changed. It's not fused, it's free. Then andrecium, numerous are present. In some cases, it may be attached to the petals, but not mostly. Okay. So there are numerous that are fused to form a bundle. You will enclose this within brackets. Gynoecium, in most cases, you will have around 5 carpels. But since this is a family that has many species, the number of carpels between species can vary between 2 to multiple. So since we've taken the example of 5 so far in our description, let us write 5 here. Okay. So this is the floral diagram. Mother axis, all of the outside wall represents epicalyx, it is not fused. Inner to that you have calyx, it is fused, so these regions, these junctions, this is one sepal, this is the other sepal. In between the two, there are these junctions which represent that it is fused. Inside that, you have petals 5 in number, which are, free. They are not fused, so there's no joining here. You can see very clearly it is showing twisted aestivation. You can see how there are multiple stamens present. They are all fused, so this circle connecting all of the stamens are representing the fusion. Here you have the central carpel where you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locules present and you can clearly see axial placentation here, right? So that is the floral diagram for Malvaceae. What do we have next? Its economic importance. Lady's finger, that belongs to Malvaceae. The cotton in our clothes, that is also Malvaceae. Hibiscus plant, almost used in all households in India as an ornamental plant, that also belongs to Malvaceae. So these are some of the economically important species from Malvaceae family. Now let's move on to the next dicot family, which is called Asteraceae or Compositae. This is basically the sunflower family. This is also distributed across the globe, everywhere, worldwide. Most of these plants are herbs or shrubs. You do not find big trees. And this is considered to be the most advanced type of angiosperm family. Since it's a dicot plant, root system will obviously be a taproot system. The stem, like I told you, since it's a herb or a shrub, it may be herbaceous or woody. In most cases, it is erect. Very rarely, it can be climbing. In some cases, the stems can be underground too. The leaves may be simple or compound. And leaves are, they show alternate phyllotaxy. Very rarely, it can show opposite phyllotaxy too. Leaves will have a petiole. They are petiolate. They do not have stipules, so it is exstipulate. Since this is a dicot family, it shows reticulate venation. The inflorescence here is kind of unique. It is called the head or capitulum. It is a type of raceme. Okay. The flower that we see, the sunflower, we think it is actually one flower, but it's not a single flower. It is an inflorescence. It has within that one flower head, there are multiple tiny flowers that are present. Okay, so that entire flower which we think as a flower is not really a flower. It is an inflorescence that has many tiny flowers. We'll learn about that today. So this inflorescence may be terminal or axillary, may be produced at the tip of the plant or at the axil of the leaf. Now over here, Normally what happens in a raceme, you know that the older flowers will be towards the base and the younger ones will be towards the tip, right? So this is a type of raceme. But here what happens is this axis of the inflorescence kind of flattens. The axis of the inflorescence or the stalk of the inflorescence is called the peduncle. The stalk of the inflorescence is called the peduncle. Here, since the axis becomes flat, the peduncle becomes flat. Normally, you will have bracts present at the base of the pedicel like this. But here, since it has become so flat, at the base of the peduncle, you will find bracts, green color bracts forming a cup-like structure. So it is called an involucre of bracts. I will show it to you here in this image. Do I have it? Yeah. So if you see a sunflower at the base, you will have a lot of green color small leaf-like structures. You might think that that is the calyx and these petals are the corolla. These structures are the corolla, but that's not the case. This green things here, they are the bracts. It has formed a cup or an involucre. Within that, every petal that you remove from here, petal-like structure that you remove from here is actually a flower. So all of these are individual flowers. In fact, within a sunflower head, you can have two different types of flowers. You do find two different types of flowers, which we'll discuss now. Okay, so it has an involucre of bracts within which flowers are arranged. But the flowers are so tiny here, so we call them florets. Small parts of the leaf were called leaflets, right, in a compound leaf. So here we call it a floret. So these florets are of two types. One type is called the disc floret. The other type is called the ray floret. Ray florets are these ones. Okay. So outside, whatever is forming these strap-like structure, these ones, these are called ray florets. And the ones that are present on the inside, all of these are tiny flowers. These ones, if you take it outside, you will be able to see it. These ones are called disc florets. Okay. Yeah. So how are the flowers here? Obviously, they are super tiny. They are small. They do not have individual stalks. So there is no pedicel. So they are sessile. They do have bracts that has formed an involucre. They are epigynous. For epigynous flower, I gave you the example of ray florets of sunflower, right? So you know it. And they are pentamerous, meaning the appendages are generally in multiples of 5. So what can we see here? These are the ray florets, these are the disc florets. Since they are different in morphology, different in structure, you will have separate floral diagram, separate description for ray floret. You will have separate floral diagram and formula and description for disc floret. Okay. So let's see. The reason this family is called Asteraceae is because if you look at these disc florets, each one is shaped like a star. I don't know if you can make it out here in this image, but next time you look at a sunflower or even a chrysanthemum which belongs to the same family, you can notice how the central part, whatever tiny florets are present, they are star shaped. Okay. So here towards the outside you have the ray florets, at the center you have the disc florets. Yeah, let's talk about the floral characters now. Ray florets, where are they present? Towards the outer side of the inflorescence. They are peripheral. Where are the disc florets present? They are present at the center. The ray florets may be pistillate, which means they are female, or they are neutral, meaning they don't have androecium or gynoecium. They are just there to attract the pollinators. Disc florets will have both male and female reproductive parts, so it is bisexual and it is actinomorphic. In the ray florets also, the disc florets also, sepals number will be high. Actually, you know what? 3 to 5 sepals only will be present. But those sepals will be highly dissected. Okay, so it will be like these hair-like structures. Those hair-like structures are called pappus. Okay, their number might be 3 to 5. But those 3 to 5 have gotten so much dissected that it appears like hair-like structures. And they are persistent. Persistent means what? Usually what happens to the calyx, by the time after fertilization ovary develops into the fruit, the calyx will fall off, right? But here, even in the fruit, you can find the calyx being present. You would have definitely seen these hair-like structures that you're finding here. That is nothing but the calyx. The hair-like structure is called the pappus. Okay. So here you can clearly see it is epigynous flower. This is the ovary part and this is where the calyx is present. So the calyx arises from above the ovary. So the flower is epigynous and the ovary is inferior. You can see that very clearly here, right? See here, calyx has been dissected and modified into these hair-like structures that is called pappus. Now, in both cases, it is the same. Corolla. How is the corolla? Corolla in ray florets, the number of petals is 5. Here also it is 5. In both cases, it is gamosepalous. But in ray florets, what happens is 3 petals fuse to form a strap-like structure called ligule. Strap-like structure called ligule. I'll show you the ligule here. So you can see 3 petals have fused to form a large strap-like structure called ligule. 2 other smaller petals will still be fused. So this is what appears like that ray. It appears like the petal. Okay. So it is ligulate. As opposed to that, see here, you can see these are the 3 petals that are fused to form the ligule. You can see that there is a marking also indicating the point of fusion of the petals. At the center, whatever disc florets are there, the corolla of the disc florets fuses to form a tube-like structure. So the corolla of disc florets are said to be tubular. In both cases, you will find valvate aestivation. That's about the petals. What about the androecium now? Since I told you these are either pistillate or neutral, there's no way ray florets have androecium, so androecium is absent here. What about disc florets? I told you they're bisexual, so they will have androecium and gynoecium both. Stamens will be 5 in number. They are epipetalous, dithecous anther, syngenaceous stamens. So you can see how the stamens appear here. If the stamen is said to be syngenaceous, it means the anthers will be fused and the filaments will be free. The filaments are not fused with each other. The anthers will be fused. Such a condition is called syngenaceous condition, and that is characteristic of the disc florets of sunflower family. You can see here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They are all fused to form a syngenaceous stamen. Next, how is the gynoecium? Gynoecium will be present in both cases. In both cases, they are bicarpellary syncarpous. Bicarpellary syncarpous. It has only one chamber, so it is unilocular. In both cases, the kind of placentation you find is basal placentation. Remember, I gave you the example of sunflower for basal placentation too. So it has a short style and bifid stigma. What does bifid stigma means? It means it's like a, what do you say? Like the snake's tongue, it is bifid. The stigma is like that in both the cases. Okay. Now speaking of the fruit is called cypsela. Seeds obviously are dicotyledonous and they do not contain any endosperm, so it is called endospermous or endospermic. So here's what the fruit looks like. It is called the cypsela. If you break open this fruit wall, obviously you would have consumed sunflower seeds and all of that in your salads, right? So you know that this is the fruit wall. You break this open, inside that you will have the seed. The seed will be attached to the base of this fruit, which is the cypsela. Okay, yeah. So here you can see in these flowers, this is a ray floret. Here you can see the androecium. Here you can see the style and the bifid stigma. This is the calyx in the form of pappus hair, right? Yeah. Talking about its floral formula and floral diagram, both have bracts. Ray florets are zygomorphic. Disc florets are actinomorphic. In both cases, there is calyx in the form of pappus hair. Corolla may be 3 to 5 in number. It is fused. In this case, it forms a ligule. Over there, it forms what is called a tubular structure. Here, androecium is absent, so you will write A0. Here, androecium is present. You have 5 stamens that are syngenaceous. It's also attached to the corolla, so this line. And then you have 2 bicarpellary ovary, which is fused syncarpous. That is why you have added brackets Since this is a flower which is epigynous, it has inferior ovary, we'll draw a line over G. Okay. So I hope the floral formula and floral diagrams for this is clear. What is the economic importance of Asteraceae or Compositae? Many food products we obtain from species belonging to this family, such as lettuce, sunflower seeds, sunflower, marigold, chrysanthemum, they have ornamental value, so they are grown for that. Similar to how you obtain dyes from indigo, from marigold also dyes can be obtained, organic dyes. Okay. So that's about the last Dicot family, Asteraceae or Compositae. Next, let's move on to learn about the last family for today, which is Poaceae. It is also called Gramineae. This is nothing but the grass family. It is a monocot family, also called the wheat family. This is distributed worldwide and most of the members belonging to this family are herbs. Now, speaking of its vegetative character, since the plant is a monocot plant, the root system will obviously be fibrous root system. The stem, like I mentioned earlier, most of the plants are herbs here, so the stems will be herbaceous. They may be erect, like in the case of maize, or they may grow prostately, like in the case of regular grass. It is cylindrical. How are the leaves? I told you earlier also, I showed you that sheathing leaf base and I told you how it does not have a stalk. So the leaves are sessile. Phyllotaxy is alternate. They have a sheathing leaf base. For that I gave you the example of grasses. They have simple leaves and because it's a monocot family, they show parallel venation. How are the floral characters? Here the floral character, the inflorescence is a type of raceme called spike of spikelets. It is racemose type of inflorescence. So here you have the stalk of the inflorescence, which we obviously call the peduncle. So within the peduncle, you have branching, which is called the rachis. And further, you have many such spikelets present. All of these things that I'm circling right now are called spikelets. This entire thing is called a spike of spikelets. This entire inflorescence is called a spike. Within the spike, there are many, many spikelets present. Okay. Now, how are the floral characters? Remember that in grass family, pollination mostly happens by wind. So, flowers here are not usually brightly colored or showy or large. Okay. So, here the flowers do have pedicel. So, they are pedicellate. They do have bracts. So, it is bracteate. They show bilateral symmetry. So, it is zygomorphic. In most cases, it is bisexual. But in plants such as maize, it can be unisexual. And the flowers here are hypogynous. Similar to how in the sunflower family, we call the flowers florets because they were too tiny. Even in this family, the flowers are very small in size. So, we call it florets. Okay. See here, this is one floret. This is one floret. Like that, many florets will be present in a spikelet. Okay. So, this entirely is one spikelet. See here, I'll tell you. What we are looking at right now is one such spikelet. First, we saw the entire inflorescence. Now, we are taking one spikelet. This is one spikelet. Within one spikelet, you have many florets. What are florets? Florets are simply flowers that are too tiny. Okay. So, these ones are called florets. Okay. So, at the base of each, let me represent this better. I will encircle floret in pink color. This is a floret. This entire thing is the spikelet. So, in a spikelet, at the base, you have two bracts. I told you that these flowers are bracteate, right? So, there are two bracts present for all the, these are bracts for all the florets there. It's not like each floret has its own individual bracts. Of course, it will also have bracts. I'll tell you about that later. So, now this is a common bract. These two are common bracts for the entire spikelet. So, these two bracts are called glumes. There are two of them. This is the first glume. This is the second glume. Okay, glume is the common bract that you have for the entire spikelet. Now we'll take a look at one floret. This is one floret, okay. So each floret consists further of a pair of bracts. I want you to be clear here. These glumes are bracts. They are also bracts, but they are bracts that are common to the entire spikelet. If you take individual florets, each floret further has a pair of bracts, okay. So these are, yeah, they have a pair of bracts. There is one pair, there is one bract of the pair that is larger L, and that is called lemma, and the smaller one is called palea. So here you can see this larger one. Which color should I represent? Yeah. So if this is the floral stalk, the one away from the floral stalk, this one, this is called lemma. Larger one is lemma. The smaller one closer to the floral stalk, that is called the palea. Okay. Now, glumes, these two, palea and lemma, these two, they usually have spear-like extensions that we call awns. Like right now over here, these are extensions that are arising from lemma, right? So such extensions may arise from palea, they may arise from glumes too, and they are called awns, A-W-N-S, awns. Now, what is a single floret like? Okay, so we are taking one single floret and we are looking at it here. A single floret does not have calyx and corolla separately. They have just one non-essential whorl, which is called perianth. These are also not very brightly colored. They are very pale colored. There's just two members of the perianth, and they are called laudicules. They are membranous, very thin membranous scale-like structures. So you call them laudicules. Laudicules are here. Okay. Then that is the non-essential whorl. Next, what do we have? Andrecium. How is the andrecium here? There will be three stamens, 1, 2 and 3. 3 stamens present in one whorl. Usually these monocot plants are trimerous. They may be 3 or multiples of 3 like 6. And they are not fused, so it is polyandrous. How is the gynoecium here? You can find the gynoecium here at the base, right? So the gynoecium, ovary is superior. It has a single carpel, monocarpellary. It has a single chamber, unilocular. Each ovary will have only one ovule. And the stigma here is feathery. So this thing that you're looking at here, this is feathery stigma. Like I mentioned earlier, in grasses, pollination mostly happens by wind. So if the stigma is feathery, it will help in trapping the pollen grains very easily. That's the reason the stigma has a feathery nature. What do we have next? How are the fruits here? The fruits here are called caryopsis. In a caryopsis, you can't distinguish clearly between the fruit wall and the seed coat. The fruit wall would have seeds fused with the seed coat. So see here, this is the fruit wall, pericarp. The seed coat and the fruit wall cannot be distinguished, so it is fused there. Within that you will find the seed. Since these are monocot family, the seeds will have a single cotyledon, monocotyledonous, and it contains endosperm even at maturity. So it is endospermic. How is the floral formula here? Of course, they have a lot of different types of bracts, so it is bracteate. It shows bilateral symmetry, so it is zygomorphic. It is bisexual. It has two perianth that are called laudicules. Andrecium is 3 or multiples of 3. They are free. Gynoecium, there's only one carpel, single ovary, single locule, single ovule. So you just write one there. Since this is a hypogynous flower with a superior ovary, you will draw a line underneath G. Look at the floral diagram here. This is the mother axis. You have, so you have the two, what do you call it, bracts here. This big one is called lemma and the small one is called the palea. Within that, you have two small, somewhat papery kind of perianth elements like tepals are present that are called laudicules that are represented here. Inside that, you have 3 stamens, 1, 2 and 3. Within that, you have a single carpel with a single ovule, ovary and a single ovule showing basal placentation. At the side, these structures represent the feathery stigma. So this is the floral diagram of family Poaceae. Okay. Economically important plants in this family, all of the grains, the rice, wheat, ragi, maize, all of that we get. It is from this family, including corn and oats and all of that. This family, the plants are used as fodder for animals. Bamboo is used in construction of boats and a lot of other things. And many aromatic oils can also be obtained from plants belonging to this family, such as lemongrass oil. Okay, so that's the economic importance of Poaceae or Gramineae. So with that, we've reached the end of the session. I hope this session was helpful. It was long, of course, but I hope it helped you. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next session, maybe with anatomy of flowering plants. Until then, take care of yourself, stay healthy, stay happy, and keep learning.